Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some terrifying Reddit confession threads. You guys have been loving the Reddit confession thread videos, so I'm going to keep making them as long as you guys keep watching them. So comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. But today, oh boy, we have some terrifying and horrifying confession threads. I mean, really disturbing stuff. And these are some for real confessions. I just have to leave it at that. I don't want to spoil too much, but this video will be long enough already, so please like the video, subscribe to the channel, sit back and relax, and without further ado, let's get into some terrifying Reddit confession threads. I had an affair and killed my wife. Now I am raising our toddler alone. My wife and I met when we were in our late teens. She had an extremely traumatic upbringing and severe alcohol abuse issues with occasional drug use. She would drink to blackout and was physically violent with me during these periods, and during binges would make occasional S-word attempts or threats, and was physically violent with others. She would flirt with and hang out with other men while blackout drunk. On 3 occasions throughout our relationship, I saw her kissing other men while falling down drunk. She would constantly accuse me of cheating despite me being totally faithful. For those who will say she chose to drink and is responsible for her drunken actions, that is not how addiction works. What she did choose was to not seek help for herself and play an active role in her recovery. So ultimately, she is responsible. But her behavior while drunk doesn't hurt as bad because I know it was driven by illness. What did hurt was that she didn't address the causes of this and continued to minimize, deny, and dismiss the significance of her past on her drinking and her drinking on our lives. This was a source of conflict, but ultimately I chose to support her journey, love her, and support her as best as I could, and hope things improved over time. And as we aged and matured together, she would one day be ready to face her past and address the root causes of her drinking. As we aged, the frequency decreased, but it was still really bad. She had awful social anxiety, and we were not able to socialize with my friend group because the results would be awkward or embarrassing situations due to the excessive drinking. Bouts of S-word threats or attempts decreased significantly, but binge drinking continued and occasional violence still happened. I smoked a lot of weed, but was functional and successful in my career. I do not drink and was not physically abusive. I was emotionally abusive. For example, I would yell at her the day after she did something like run off into the night drunk and go into traffic, hit me or someone I love, and so on. It's worth noting that I grew up with an alcoholic father, and then my mom was with a man for my high school years who was alcoholic and abusive, and that my father eventually OD'd and died when I was a young adult. My wife and I moved about 2,500 miles across the country to my home city with the goal of me starting a business and us getting away from people and places that were very triggering for her. It went pretty well. She went back to work in her profession to help cover bills while I started my company. Prior to having our child, she worked but did not drive. I would drive her to work, drive to meet her at lunch, drive to pick her up. I began earning so much money that we lost more by me driving her around than she would earn. And as a couple, we were further ahead with her not working. She stopped working and said she drank because she was bored. If she was going to be home, she wanted to be a mom. She swore she would stop drinking to have a child, and she did. We got pregnant and she stopped entirely. The pregnancy was awful. The birth was complicated and mid-pandemic. We had no family support. I was busy with my company. She was overwhelmed being the 24/7 caregiver to a demanding infant/toddler. We stopped having relations or intimacy times due to her pregnancy difficulties and didn't resume due to birthing injuries. I stayed faithful and dealt with my intimate needs myself. Sidebar is that I am a very intimate person and had always struggled with our intimate relationship. At times when she would get drunk and become abusive, I would consider straying. I went as far as going for a walk with a girl once, but felt awful and told the girl I had to leave. When our son was about a year old, she was clearly feeling overwhelmed, which was very reasonable. Even the most functional person would feel overwhelmed being with an infant 24/7 with no friends, no family, and a disengaged husband. She started drinking again as a result. But at the time, I didn't see how this was a symptom of her lack of support. All I saw was that my son was going to grow up like I did, and she was breaking her promise without trying to get help. One night around 2 a.m., I heard noises in our bedroom and found her passed out drunk with our toddler crawling around on the floor. I went in and grabbed our toddler and angrily yelled, "What are you doing? If you passed out with him on the chair, you could have suffocated him," and started leaving with him. She got angry and punched me in the face and pulled our toddler from my arms. I completely lost my temper, and for the first time ever, I hit her back. I hit her like a father would hit the back of a child's head when they're misbehaving. It was fairly hard. She started crying. Something broke inside me in that moment. The level of abuse, dysfunction, my disappointment in myself for hurting her, for hurting our child, for bringing him into this environment and failing to make life safe and stable for him, it all flooded me. I had become a horrible, hateful person. I had so much resentment for my wife, my partner in life, my co-parent, that I hit her. I felt sick to my stomach, and I knew that I would never do something like this again. If I ever got near that point, I need to leave, not just the physical space, but the relationship. The next day we talked, and she said she deserved it and knew she needed to change. More of the same, not addressing the issues, but feeling shameful and swearing off drinking for a time, only to eventually build enough resentment and stress to justify returning. Infrequently, binge nights happened, but they were limited to her playing loud music, which was upsetting, but I did my best to ignore it and try to sleep. We moved to a new house in the fall of 2022, and things were good in terms of drinking. She didn't really drink at home at all. We had intimate times maybe twice a month, but it felt like a chore and seemed to hurt her. Life was a grind. I would get up, work, come home, do childcare, and she would try to see me for a bit after our toddler fell asleep. Usually, we'd be together for 10 to 20 minutes before she would wake up screaming. It was so stressful that she would sometimes not try to see me and just stay in bed scrolling for a couple of hours before sleeping herself. I could see that it frustrated and overwhelmed her too. We had zero time to ourselves. Her family was not functional and in another part of the country. My family had all passed away. She didn't want any babysitters until our toddler could speak clearly and was mature enough to share any situations of mistreatment. I felt like a paycheck. She felt like a mom robot. She was trying hard, staying sober, and she got her license and she could drive him to some appointments. I tried talking to her about driving to appointments across the city so I didn't need to leave work. But she was too nervous with our toddler in the car. She tried talking to me about being more involved and present. All she wanted from me was to get up with them at 7 to 8 a.m. They slept together in our bed, so she was alone at night and alone getting up in the morning. I slept in the basement. I would often work or game until 3 to 4 a.m. and get up around 9 to 10 a.m. I asked her to move him into the baby room, but she wouldn't because she felt anxious that she was too far away at night, unable to respond in time for a fire, wouldn't hear a medical issue, etc. I was upset that I paid for a 4-bedroom house in an expensive area and we used 1 bedroom. She was upset about my lack of support. I was upset about our lack of connection. She was too. I asked for therapy, but she refused. I started developing feelings for a coworker. I told myself that if I hit midlife and dedicated 15 years to this person and drinking was still a problem, and on top of that, I'm developing feelings for another woman and feeling like my attempts to resolve things with my wife weren't working, that I needed to end the relationship before I cheated. I brought up that I was in a really scary mental state, that I wasn't doing well mentally, and that I needed her to hear me. I needed connection. She got angry and refused to do anything until I stepped up. She brought up all the wrong I had done. The next time she drank, she played loud music while I was trying to put our child into bed. I texted her about it and she told me something like, "Now you know how it feels to struggle alone as a parent, bud." The next day, I told her I wanted a divorce. Her reaction scared the shit out of me. She was so sad and scared and shaking, scream crying, begging me to stay. I felt so fucking bad. So awful. So guilty. It hurt me so deeply to see the woman I love hurting so bad. I knew I was developing intense feelings for another woman and felt checked out. But how the fuck do I just leave the mother of my child, who has no other supports in this state? At the same time, how do I continue? I was totally tapped out. I had nothing left. I was so sad, but also so angry that she didn't go into therapy with me before, that I went through more than a decade of intense abuse and infidelity. She refused to address it, but now that something is hurting her, she is totally invested in therapy, and that I don't want to was seen by her as unfair, not giving her a chance, abandoning and betraying her. It was so hard. I told her I don't want to reconcile until I see her do the work to address the root causes of her drinking. No more caving and forgiving because of promises to be better. I need to see it first. My feelings for my coworker were getting stronger. As we worked closely together, I told myself I need to either forget about other women and totally dedicate myself to my wife altogether and accept a lifetime of struggle with these issues, or try connecting with another woman to see what it's like. I began opening up about my emotional pain to my coworker. She told me she was going through a breakup, and I lied and said I was too. I took my ring off at work so she could be more open to talking to me deeply. I thought I would wait until my wife had done some therapy and cut off the conversations with my coworker if my wife put in the effort and made progress. My wife wouldn't go to therapy solo or Alcoholics Anonymous. She said she doesn't need it and was only interested in going with me. This made it seem to me like she wasn't focused on her drinking or her trauma, only in reconciling. To reconcile, I needed her to make that shift. I was growing closer and closer with my coworker, and we started going for drives outside of work at night. My car broke down in a remote spot, and it was in the middle of a cold snap in March. The tow truck was a 2-hour wait. We huddled up, and I put my arm around her. I hadn't had intimate relations in weeks and was not thinking clearly. I started touching her intimately, and we had intimate time. It was very fast, only a couple of minutes. As soon as it was done, the tow truck came. I took her home and went home myself. I felt sick, and I went to what was now my basement apartment and cried while I cleaned myself. I reached out to a male friend who told me to deny until I die. I thought my wife would commit S-word if I told her, but I wonder if we could have worked through it. Maybe I was just selfish and a coward. Weeks went by, and I did couples therapy with my wife. I wasn't able to invest fully because of my connection with my coworker. Even without her, I don't know if I would have been able to succeed in couples therapy. When I brought up the years of unaddressed abuse, resentment, and betrayal, my wife would fairly point out that it was years ago. I'm just focusing on the negative. Let's move forward. We couldn't seem to focus on and get validation about my past hurts with her, and she didn't want to do AA or therapy individually for her trauma. I stopped going to couples therapy and started engaging with my coworker more. I told my wife that I needed space to think and just to see if my feelings change. This was true in a way, but I didn't give her a fair shot at all because there was no space for my feelings to change. She stayed sober and was an absolute rock star mom and partner. I feel so fucking awful for being unfaithful to her. She caught on and started finding the evidence. She found my coworker's hair on my shirt and asked me about it. I denied it. She went through my phone records and saw I've been calling her often. I told her I had developed a connection with her and was confiding in her, but that's it. That wasn't true. She demanded I stop. I told her I would. I did for a couple weeks, but started again. She found cat hair on my clothes one night. I denied it was due to being at a coworker's house. She found intimate stains on my pants one night. I said it was from snooking it. I mentally abused her by gaslighting her. She knew she was right, but wanted to believe me so bad, and I took advantage of that. In September of 2023, I still maintained that I wasn't dating, but that I wanted to. I encouraged her to go on dating sites and start dating, that I would watch our toddler for her so she could date others and have the romantic connection and simple human connection she craved. Unfortunately, this caused so many triggers for her that she began drinking again. It got bad, fast. I found her at home unconscious drunk during the day with our toddler running around. I told her I would have to take him away if she didn't get help. She swore that she would, but things just got worse. She started going on 2 to 4 day benders, showing up high on something, not looking, talking, or acting like herself. I was so hurt and so angry. I started sleeping at my coworker's house a few nights a week and set up cameras at home to make sure our toddler was safe while I wasn't there. She asked me for help, and I gave her a therapist's name and offered to pay for everything. I was also giving her $2,000 to $3,000 per month of spending money, while carrying all expenses except groceries. I offered to get maids to take care of cleaning and reduce the load. We reached a point where she said she needed to be out of the house and away from my clothes, my smell, my presence, so she could heal. I told her I needed the freedom to drug or alcohol test her at any time to make sure our toddler was safe. This became an emergency court action, and she eventually agreed. I helped her get a new townhouse, gave her the car, but she drove drunk and crashed it twice. My insurance covered the repairs both times, totaling $17,000. It became very scary. Her grandma died, who was one of the last people who she felt connected to. I could see a dark change in her, and she began wearing her grandma's hats and bracelets. Her other grandma died not long after, and she got even worse. I reached out to my wife's brother to express my concern, and to my surprise, he was not angry with me. He was just as scared as me, and we met to talk about our fear that she was dying. Selfishly, my thoughts were that I could never escape being the rescuer to my wife's emergencies. There was always an emergency. If I wasn't having an affair and simply ended our marriage, it would have still been a 10 out of 10 betrayal, and she still would have viewed me the same way. I think. Who knows if I'm right. I held fast and didn't end my affair to reconcile or just be a support for her. I maintained that she needed to go to AA, go to therapy, and stop going on 2 to 4 day benders, forcing me to be off work and confusing/scaring our toddler. I decided to move out in March of 2024. My wife got her own place in April of 2024. I couldn't financially manage paying my wife $2,000 per month net to help her survive while also paying for my own household and expenses. I cut my work hours from 50 hours per week to 20 so I could watch our toddler. This allowed my wife to work. My coworker and I were becoming more serious, and I opened up to my wife about the fact that I was dating her, but lied about the timeline. I said I started dating her in October. She was devastated and confirmed that I had been lying the whole time. She said she was not comfortable with my coworker being around our child until we had been dating for a year. My coworker said she needs me to be completely honest with my wife, no more lies, no more half-truths. So I was. I told my wife I'd been dating my coworker since May 2023. She was devastated all over again. She went through all the events I gaslit her about, all the lies, all the times it seemed like we were connecting, and told me that this was going to kill her. The lack of honesty and betrayal. I was her person, her husband, the one person who didn't leave her no matter how she treated me or what she did. And that in 2022, she finally started feeling safe with me. We were talking about having a second child, but at the end of 2022, I blacked out because I didn't want to have another child before the drinking issue was treated. She told me she wants me to be totally honest with my coworker. And if I was, and my coworker didn't leave me, she would meet my coworker and consent to our child being around during the days I had our toddler at house. I told my coworker 70% of the truth, but didn't tell her that I cheated on her with my wife 3 times over the course of the year. Now, obviously, my coworker felt hurt, betrayed, angry, sad, and demanded that I don't continue conversations with my wife. I don't go to her house. I don't play the role of her support figure. I should have said, too bad. I know it's unfair, but this is my child's mother who is in a crisis, and my primary job right now is to come clean about everything and try to help my wife get sober and healthy. I didn't, though. I tried my best to toe the line. I wanted to keep my new relationship and work my way up to being honest. I was in therapy. I FaceTime my wife daily, either to do bedtime stories with her toddler when he was at her place or vice versa. I took her food to show affection through her grieving process, with her grandmother's deaths and our divorce. In mid-May of this year, I realized I couldn't do this. I'd rather be with my wife, drinking or not, and do my best to help her. Seeing her in this much pain and knowing how much I contributed and how awful it was, I knew I had to stop what I was doing. I called my mom. She lives far away, in case anyone is wondering why she was not a family support for our child, to tell her the truth about everything. My mom was very disappointed in me, but supported me in returning to my wife. I decided to sleep on it. If I still felt so strongly and so certainly the next day, I would tell my coworker that I am not sorry, but I must prioritize family. In the morning, I got a call that she had died by S-word the night before. She left a note saying that she could not handle the PTSD and nightmares from me gaslighting her. She was clear in the note that this was my fault, that I betrayed and abandoned her and left her alone during the worst time of her life. She was clear, explicitly, that I killed her. The coroners and detectives warned me not to read the notes, but I had to know. I came clean to my coworker about everything, including my intent to leave. Now I have lost my wife, the mother of my child, my person. I see clearly now how, despite her flaws and faults, and although her drinking was not my fault, the stress I caused her that often triggered her drinking was my fault. I see how much more I could have done. I see how horribly abusive I was. My wife was too, but not in the recent past. I see how distorted I was. I wake up in the night often. I cry constantly. I have breakdowns multiple times per day. I shake. I feel sick. I might as well have killed my wife myself. My child is going to grow up with no family except for me. When they are 18 and ask me the truth about their mom, I will tell them, and they will hate me. I don't need any of you to tell me how awful I am. I already know. I want to die. If it wasn't for my toddler, I would commit S-word. I now struggle day to day trying to stay alive to look after my child. I hate myself. I hate what I have done. I hate that I will never have a chance to explain to her. I hate that I slept on it. I was less than 12 hours away from making my decision while she was still alive, and I'm certain it would have prevented her death. Why? I hate that I prioritized the person I knew and dated for a year over the person I was with for 15 years, married, and had a child with. Yeah, she abused me. Who fucking cares? She would have always been there. If I put in more effort, she would have been okay. All she needed was some support. She was alone in the world except for me, and I checked out on her. Yeah, she refused so many chances to heal or address her issues before, but who the fuck cares? Why be spiteful or say should have changed when he had the chance? All that matters is that she was ready. That it wasn't on my timeline didn't warrant my spiteful withdrawal. I ruined my life. I killed my wife. I lost my girlfriend. I destroyed my family. I destroyed my wife's family. I devastated my mom, who lost a daughter and now has a shell of a son. I upped my life insurance to $3 million. I hope I die. My child will be set for life and will not have to deal with having a monster for a father. So many people tried to warn me. My coworker asked me many times if I was certain I was done with my wife. She said if I wanted to try again with her, I could, and she would wait for me. My best friend warned me. My wife begged me to give her one more chance. I am so sorry for what I have done. I don't deserve to live. And yeah, let's just sit with that for a second, because that's a lot to process. A ton of emotion in the OP's writing. This is just one of the most intense and emotional confessions or threads I've ever read before. The OP doesn't seem to be doing okay. I mean, most of the time these confessions end on a good note, but this one just kept going down and down and down, and he doesn't seem to be doing well. But let's get into some of the comments, because the OP does lay out some more issues or address some issues in the comments. So let's get into that. The OP says, I'm in therapy in a bereavement group. I needed to dump all my thoughts somewhere, and I don't want to put this on a friend. I've had some nice comments of support. I hope someone somewhere who might be in a similar situation will read my story, and maybe it'll help them pause and consider what could happen. I never thought S-word would be the outcome here. I thought I had time to try a relationship with someone stable for a while. Worst case scenario in my mind was I regretted it and asked my wife to take me back. It can happen to anyone. It's definitely not the norm, but most people who are cheated on don't die from S-word, but it can happen. And that's the reason that he outlined it here well. And the reason why I make a lot of these confession videos, because these people, or these people that make these posts, can really provide support for everyone watching now. If you're in a similar situation, you're not alone. And you can just learn some lessons from people who have already been through something, and you can just realize that you're not alone. And, you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can figure out your own experience or your situation. Some other commenter says, this is one of the most haunting things I have ever read. I will never forget you. This will live with me forever now. I'll keep you and your child in my thoughts. Always. And then the OP responds saying, I also feel haunted by this, by every misstep, every choice. It is a nightmare, and I can't believe I've made such bad decisions that this is now my life. No do-overs. This is it. Every day, forever. Thank you for your thoughts. Another commenter says, my heart breaks for you, man. The only thing that's going to help you is therapy and time. You're doing the right thing by being accountable, attending support groups and individual therapy sessions, but this is a long, long road. Eventually, you'll come to understand that you're not a monster. You're just a guy that made a series of very bad decisions that, had you known the ramifications of beforehand, wouldn't have made. There was no way for you to know how your wife was going to react when you were honest with her. Stick in there. It gets better. Put in the work and be a better person for your kid. And the OP responds to this saying, thank you for this. It's interesting that when I read what you're saying, I can believe that it's true, but I don't feel it. Right now, I think any attempt I make to lighten the path feels like letting myself off the hook. My wife is dead, and it feels wrong to do anything except suffer horribly. I hope in time I experience healing and can remember all the positives about her and how much joy she brought to our family and those around her. You are right that I am a human being who made bad choices. I think that undersells the significance and impact of my behavior and how short-sighted it was, but at the end of the day, I was hurting and not thinking clearly at all. My child is my priority now. These cycles can't be allowed to repeat. 2 generations now have died prematurely to ODing or S-word. My measure of success in my toddler growing up happy, healthy, safe, and loved. And I mean, that's great. The OP is taking accountability and realizing that the best steps forward is to take care of his child and to make sure this doesn't happen again and the cycle doesn't repeat. So that's a great, happy ending. And then the OP does answer a lot of general questions, which we can get into briefly. He makes an edit saying, wow, I am overwhelmed by the comments here, and so I will write a general response to everyone. For those who wrote with support, thank you so much. The comments of support from strangers are oddly comforting. I am doing my best to heal. Though at this point, it does feel like recovery from this is not possible. I'm trying to take the perspective that this is the emotional version of a catastrophic physical injury, where the best outcome possible is recovering some ability and making peace with the ability that has been lost. For those who can relate, I'm sorry. If you can relate to my story, you have likely gone through a lot of pain and a lot of experience with severe mental health issues or addictions. I hope you find healing in your life. For those who wrote that this is fake, I think it would be good to reflect on why you think it's important to post comments like this. What is gained? The best case scenario is you are correct and someone is hurting so much in their personal life that they make up fake stories to get some type of connection. Someone without comfort in their life is a human being in need of help. Why would you want to prioritize catching them rather than giving them support? I checked a couple of profiles of people who wrote these negative comments about fake posts, and generally, the comment histories are intense, angry, and negative. If this is you, I hope you find whatever is missing from your life that is hurting you so much. For those who wrote hateful messages about my wife, I think only someone who has been hurt by others who have addictions can lack empathy and feel so justified in condemning another human being. I hope you're able to heal from your anger and find peace in your life. Addiction is horrible, but it is only a symptom of the pain that person has been through. Some people have enough support to heal and overcome this, but not everyone does. It is helpful, I think, to not judge people who are struggling in this way. For those who have messaged me wishing death upon me, I think only someone who has been hurt by another person in their life who has done something like I have done could be so angry that they would wish death upon me. I am sorry you have experienced so much pain in your life, and I hope you will find healing. For those who ask kindly for clarification about certain points that seem unusual, my mom lives very far away, so it was untrue to say that all my family has passed away. For someone like me who grew up with grandparents, aunts and uncles, mom and dad, it feels like I've lost everyone. I understand if some of you believe you've caught some major mistake, and this proves conclusively this is a fake story, and you are entitled to that belief. It does not justify you sending messages of hate. Regarding the term coworker versus employee, I have never viewed those who work for me as less than. I go out of my way to not call myself boss or them employees or subordinates, totally outside the point of my post. I also go out of my way to avoid creating a dynamic of work where I am clearly superior to anyone else. Like the above, if you believe this is proof that my story is fake, that's okay. But again, please don't act hatefully. You can just move on from the post. And that is the last we've heard of the OP from this post and about this post. So I really do hope this OP and the OP is doing better now. And I really liked how he answered the questions at the end, because sometimes I read the comments on this video or the videos that I make and people are like, oh, that's a fake confession. And he outlined it well there. It's like, why would someone fake a confession for just some like internet pity points? I don't know. Sure, it's possible, but at the same time, why would someone spend so much time fabricating a fake story to gain pity points? I don't know. Sure, he said, believe it if you want, but I'm really glad that he answered all those questions at the end, because I'm sure a lot of you were thinking that or thinking of some of those questions. So I'm glad he provided those answers, but I really do hope the OP is doing better now. And if anyone watching is going through something similar, hopefully this added some, comfort to you to realize that you're not alone and that you can get through it. And I hope the OP is just doing better now and he can just, continue on getting better and better each day, raising his child the best he can, and just improving his life from this horrible catastrophe that I hope he can move on from and learn something from. And rest in peace to OP's wife and, everyone involved. But very, very terrifying and sad and depressing story. I just hope everyone is well now. On to the next one. I slowly became an alcoholic and it ruined my life. Male 25. Moved to California about a month before the pandemic. Came to start a small production company in the Bay Area with my longtime best friend. I met an older woman about a week before the pandemic that turned into an intense romance, and we fled the Bay Area for the SoCal desert around the second week of March. I was immediately intoxicated by the landscape and felt an incredible draw to the environment and its earthly beauty. The magenta-kissed mountains at dawn, the soft afternoon breeze, the psychedelic sunsets, What started as a 2-week stint, she returned to her parents' home to quarantine, we still remained together, turned into 9 months plus of staying there. I've always enjoyed isolation and felt it was a positive, detoxifying place for me to be after living in New York for almost 7 years. It started slow, with just a few sips of something to take the edge off and relax while watching the sunset. As the nights followed, what started as a few sips turned into glass upon glass upon glass. Frequently, if not every night, for nearly 4 months straight, finishing a half a handle. I would religiously, each night, light candles and listen to music, and it just all felt so calm. It seemed in some way to amplify the beauty of the desert environment. It helped me feel something, I guess, I hadn't felt before. Free. Although I was strictly drinking mezcal, which never left me with a single hangover, I did not realize the effects of such heavy drinking on my day-to-day cognitive function. The euphoria I would experience each night, at times almost psychedelic in nature, flowed into my everyday, and the feeling of confidence, invincibility, and what I can only describe as true happiness only grew deeper. I was running half marathons, taking some of the strongest photographs of my career, and making a ton of new friends. However, these feelings were also leading me to make extremely rash and erratic decisions, from making extremely speculative investments at huge losses, cheating on my girlfriend with multiple women, and carelessly making mistakes at my job, and withdrawing all of my life savings to purchase a piece of land in the desert. The effects of the liquor only compounded and compounded, with each decision and action being more careless and thoughtless than the last, and by the end of the summer, I'd been fired from my job, had nearly thrown away my career, was in nearly $100,000 worth of debt, and was on the brink of losing my girlfriend. Now in 2021, I've been sober for nearly 32 days, but am still just clawing back at the effects of my alcoholism from last year. I don't know what it was that drove me to drink in such excess, spend in such excess, act without any regard for the true consequences of my actions for myself and those around me. How I allowed my life to completely spiral out of control. Perhaps it was what I felt the alcohol alleviated from my lifelong battle with depression and anxiety. During those summer months, I can't remember feeling sad or anxious or lonely a single time. I can't lie. I wish, more than anything, in the world to feel like that again. I've been battling S-word thoughts more recently and weirdly fantasizing about living out the last few months of my life like that again, just to feel like that one more time. But I know I can't, because it will destroy whatever it is I have left. I am a drug addict. This is my story. For 9 years now, I've been addicted to Breaking Bad substance. I'm sorry I have to censor it, but I'm sure a lot of you have watched Breaking Bad, and it's the crystal. So yeah, it's ruined my life. During that time, I've lost my wife, my kids, my house, my job, my car, and my self-respect, and most of my teeth. I started doing crystal, and I kept it from my wife for a long time, but eventually she figured it out. She told me I had to stop immediately, or she and the kids were leaving. I agreed and promised to stop, then got high the same night. She eventually figured it out again and gave me the same ultimatum, but added that I needed to join a 12-step program. I did, and I stayed clean for a long time, but then I had a shitty day and went right back to it. She found out, and she and the kids left that night. She told me that we were done. She made it clear to me that it was them or the crystal, and I picked crystal. After they left and my wife sent me the divorce papers, I started to spiral. I started doing more, and eventually it affected my work. I fucked something up because I was strung out from the night before. It was an accident with heavy machinery. Thankfully, no one was injured, but it was company policy to drug test me, and I did not pass it, so they fired me. I got even more into crystal and would do it for days with friends at the apartment I was living in. Eventually, I needed more drugs but had no more money, so I started doing petty crimes for drug money. Then the unthinkable happened. My ex-wife was in a terrible accident and passed away. My children had already lost their father, and now they lost their only parent who was taking care of them. I was high as shit when I heard the news. I had a breakdown and I checked myself in a rehab and joined the program again. I had to be there for my children. They were living with her parents as they were the closest family. I got my act together and saw them for the first time in over 4 years. I was afraid I might never be able to get them to forgive me, but the first thing they did was hug me and cry because I looked so much better than the last time they saw me. I started working multiple jobs to save more money, but I would come by and see them every couple weeks. I worked 60+ hour weeks for 4 years, saving every penny I could, and when my son graduated last year, I told him about the money I saved for his and his sister's education. He was speechless. It was not a small amount I saved for both of them, but I lived in a shitty studio in a bad part of town, had 2 decent paying jobs, and I didn't have things like cable, internet. I'm using my neighbor's Wi-Fi for my phone, or bought anything that wasn't essential. Between the money I saved, his parents saved, and his scholarship, my son went to one of the better law schools in the country. He was reluctant to take that much money from me, and he is still angry with me for everything I have done, and rightfully so, but I'm glad I convinced him to take it. I told him that I didn't get the money because I wanted him to forgive me. I did it because he deserved better than what he got from me, and so does his sister. I'm so proud of him. He's going to be an incredibly successful someday. He's going to be a better man than I am in every imaginable way, despite the ways I failed him for so much of his life. I'm still on track with my daughter's money, and she's graduating next year. I did have to quit the second job early this year because, honestly, both jobs are very physically demanding, and I honestly just can't do these kind of long hours anymore. My doctor tells me I will probably need knee surgery in the near future because of the damage done to my knees, but honestly, I don't care if I ever walk again after next year, as long as I get my daughter her money to further her education in whatever way she sees fit. If I can do that for my children, it won't make up for anything, but it'll ensure that they will be well off. She wants to be a doctor. I just hope she can swing med school with the money I'm getting her. It'll all be worth it to see my children succeed. I'm doing better now. I'll be getting my 5-year chip in a few months. I will never use again or let my children down. I'm planning on getting a second job again in a few months after some more time of working only 50-ish hours a week just to get more money. I know my body will hate me for this, and I will have at best maybe a few years before things get worse for me physically, but it's okay. I will be fine knowing that I made sure my children will be successful and better than me. It's going to be worth it. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "Wow, what a life, man. Congrats on the sobriety and overcoming it before it took you." Someone else says, "Thank you for sharing, bro. It's okay to fall down, but you must get up. You had your share of downfalls, but you also got the strength and rose to the occasion. I wish you nothing but success in your life and hope you find what it is you're looking for. Cheers." And since then, the OP's account has been banned, so I don't know how he's been doing. This was posted 4 years ago, so hopefully the OP is doing well now. Hopefully his kids are in college. Hopefully they've graduated from college and are doing well now. But wow, what a story of, getting down, but eventually getting back up. Seems to have ended on a good note, which is always great. I broke somebody's spinal cord and now he is paralyzed for life. When I was 12, there was this boy in my classroom who loved gymnastics I used to pick on sometimes. Me and my friends called him Girly or F-slur and stuff. One day in gym class, he was doing some kind of gymnastic twirl. I do not know what this is called in English, but is like a complicated gymnastic pose. I don't know. When I decided to push his back with my foot in order to make him fall, he fell down to the ground heavily and broke his spinal cord, which most likely will have him paralyzed for his entire life. I was not sentenced in any way due to that. It was considered an accident, and because of my young age, law might be different in my country than in the US. I just got changed to another school. I've tried to reach him and his family several times, but they do not want anything to do with me, of course. He was a boy with dreams and talent in gymnastics, and I have forever ruined his life. I have been depressed ever since. I wish I could swap places with him because he does not deserve that. Almost 3 years have passed and it feels like a never-ending nightmare. Somebody will not be able to live his life properly because I am a jerk. No one wants to be near me since then. I look forward to starting an anti-bullying campaign in the future, but nothing will ever be enough because the boy will always be in a wheelchair, no matter how much I try to redeem myself. I watched a man commit S-word. And that's not the exact title, but I have to censor for YouTube's sake. But anyways, let's get into it. I watched a man commit S-word in person right in front of me. A little backstory. I am a firearms instructor / range safety officer at a shooting range. Before any first-time guest, regardless of their shooting experience, come to the range, and before they are allowed to rent a firearm or use their own on our range, they must register and create accounts on our iPads near the front entrance, and they must watch a safety video explaining not only the rules of our range, but general universal firearm safety rules. And every guest who is not a law enforcement officer or holder of a firearms license must come with a buddy and a valid form of identification, driver's license or US ID, or a passport for non-Americans. Nobody shoots alone unless the mentioned criteria is met. And before we get into the rules, I just want to emphasize how important this is, whether or not you support guns or you don't support guns or whatever, or have shot a gun or haven't shot a gun or never want to, or you do want to. I think it's very important, and these are rules everybody should know, especially if you're in the US where guns are a lot more common, I guess. But yeah, the OP then lists 7 rules that are very important, and I myself just agree with everything said, and it's very important for everybody to know this. So number 1, always keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction. Number 2, always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. 3, always keep the gun unloaded until ready to use. 4, know your target and what is beyond / behind it. 5, know how to operate your firearm safely. Number 6, always wear eye and ear protection. Number 7, never use drugs or alcohol before or while using a firearm. Okay, so now we got that out of the way, let me explain how our range handles safety. It is always our number 1 priority. It does not matter how long you've been shooting. From a novice to a master, if any RSO reasonably believes you are being unsafe with your firearm, rented or owned, you will be ejected from the range, banned, and have no refund. Furthermore, prior to first-time guests entering the range, they must go through a hands-on training class on how to use firearms safely, as a fail-safe for anyone zoning out during the video. During this time, we are not only demonstrating properly and safely using firearms, but we also watching mannerisms, behaviors, and looking for red flags. Unfortunately, this person was not demonstrating any red flag behavior, so we had no idea this person had the intention of using our gun to do something horrifying. He was laughing and smiling and holding conversations with us and the rest of the staff. At around 4 p.m. on a Friday in early September, 2 men came in to rent a pistol. After they went through our first-time guest registration process, they went into the range to shoot, being supervised by myself and my coworker. There were 2 other guests shooting as well, one who I know and talk to regularly, and another who is a member of our range, but I am not familiar with. After the 2 men shot upwards of 70 to 80 rounds, the man goes up, takes a few shots at his target, takes his ear protection off, and turns the gun to commit S-word. And before I lifted my hands and yelled for him to stop, he fired a single shot. And then the description gets graphic, so I won't read everything because it's just very graphic, but he commits S-word right there. He was dead before he hit the floor, and before either of us RSOs can react, his body is now on the ground with blood pooling as we guide the other shooters out of the range. We have quick alarm buttons on our walls in every range and at the counters outside to call for either medical or police. I lift the glass on medical and hit the button. My coworker's radio, in that we have a S-word, and to have the guy at the counter call 911. We both stood over the guy's body, not knowing what else we could do or what we should have done to prevent this from happening and saving his life. What haunts me to this day is the fact that there were no indications of this man having the idea of doing something like that. Hug your loved ones, say you love them, call your family, call your friends, check in on them. You never know what someone is feeling or thinking, and I learned that lesson the hard way. P.S. I'm fine. It was intense, but I proceeded it without lasting impact. I stayed grounded. I understood the gravity of the situation, but it didn't resonate with me on a personal level. I almost killed my stepmom. This is pretty hard for me to post. I've never talked to anyone about this. Even my wife doesn't know the full extent of it, but here we go. In 2000, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was a 2-pack-a-day smoker for about 25 years. She fought hard and was able to extend the short life expectancy the doctors gave her. I'm not sure how long they gave her. I was 10. They spared me the details. Anyways, she survived for over a year and ended up passing away in February of 2001. I remember as if it was yesterday. Her best friend came over the very next day as we were in mourning to pay respects and say goodbyes to her friend, which is normal and fine. The thing I felt weird about was that same night, the day after my mother's passing, she spent the night with me and my dad. She slept on the couch. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. Had other things on my mind, obviously. Plus, we had numerous family and friends coming by and sleeping over before her passing as well, so I grew semi-used to it. Time goes on, and it seems every other night she's sleeping over. Within the first months of my mother's death, she's finally sleeping in my dad's room with him. During this time, she was respectful and nice. She brought her 2 youngest kids a lot as well, which was nice at the time. Fast forward 3 months. We ended up moving, and she and her 2 kids end up coming with us. By this time, they are already talking about marriage, which I strongly protested, along with every single family member of mine as well. They decided to ignore me and everyone else and get married the same year my mother passed away. At first, things were the same as they were, but as time went on, she began to show favoritism to her own kids, which I guess is understandable. But to the extent that it grew was kind of disturbing. She'd let her kids get away with murder. They would taunt me, make fun of my dead mom, threw ashtrays at me yelling, "Your mom wants a hug." She was cremated, so pretty much anything with ash was fair game to use to fuck with me. A year goes by in the new house, and me being a skater kid, I frequented the skate park a lot. On my way back home one day, I ate shit. Bad. Hit a crack in the road on a very steep and large hill. I was probably going in excess of 20 miles an hour. The board stopped, my body flew, then rolled a few more feet. I was barely able to move but managed to hobble back, cradling my arm like a baby and screaming at the top of my lungs the entire way home. As I'm walking up, she intercepts me in the garage and accuses me of overreacting and tells me the quote of, "Stop being a little pussy." I knew there was something wrong with my arm, considering I was physically unable to move it at all. But she wouldn't listen to me. And my dad wasn't home from work yet either. For hours, I waited for him to show up, and when he does, it turned out my SM had already talked to him, so he wouldn't listen either. And I think SM is stepmom. The next day was a school day. I remember this because I was awoken by my stepmom, little cretin of a son, throwing my full backpack onto my chest to wake me up. I woke up screaming. Stepmom comes running into the room and promptly tells me to shut the fuck up, you're not hurt. Stop faking because you're going to school. Well, I couldn't stop. I was in agony. I was still holding my arm like a baby, so she punched my bicep, in the fashion friends would I guess you could call, and said, "I'm taking your dumb ass to the hospital just to make sure you feel stupid when they tell you nothing is wrong." Well, upon seeing the doctor, he almost immediately says, "Yup, your shoulder is broken. I can tell by the way your arm instinctively supporting your arm." SM was silent. Doctor set up x-rays. Turns out my collarbone was completely shattered. Proved her wrong, but it only fueled her rage more, it seemed. She became spiteful, took away all my skateboards, bikes, anything that I could ride. My arm was in a sling anyway, so it wasn't like I could use them anyways. But she had no intent on giving them back to me. In fact, she gave them to her own son. Even my own dad said it was for the best because I've shown to be irresponsible with them and can't use them correctly. Only thing I was able to do was play video games. Barely. considering my arm was completely bundled up. Another few months go by and my arm is healing up good, and we all go on an easy hike in the desert. We find and pick up some wild cactus apples. Excited and eager, I start eating one with the help of my dad. Turns out there were little mites in the fruit, and I contracted scabies. Half of my face swells up in the most morbid of ways. I couldn't talk right, couldn't open one of my eyes. I was fucked up. My older sister, that I just realized I haven't mentioned at all yet in this post, came to visit me with my 2 nephews. Drove 3 hours just to hang out with me and see how I'm doing. As soon as she sees my gruesome, swollen face, she screams in terror, grabs her kids, and leaves. Needless to say, it made me feel like more shit, but I understand. She calls my dad, urging him to take me to the hospital, but stepmom refuses again, saying it's not that bad and that all I need is a nice, warm washcloth. Well, 2 weeks go by, swelling is reduced, but not completely gone. Sister threatens to call the cops if they don't do something. So stepmom again tries, saying she's gonna feel dumb when it turns out to be nothing. Well, this time doctors say at this point, they can't tell what it is. Scabies was the most likely considering the symptoms I'm told. That I should have been there 2 weeks prior when I couldn't open my eye. Stepmom takes this as a win. More time goes by, more shit happens with stepmom. CPS is called and I'm interviewed. Nothing happens with that. Holidays were ruined by her kids, yet I was to blame. I ended up basically being the Cinderella of my house at this point. My bed was even moved into the laundry room. 1 year, the pipe burst and my room flooded up to 8 inches. Nothing was done about that. Eventually, when I was about 14 years old, I worked up the courage to tell my dad what I thought about her and how she treats me. Well, I guess by this time he was so tainted by her that he began talking like her. He said, "Get over it. She's not mean. You're just trying to antagonize for the sake of drama." I told him if that's how he feels, then I'm moving out to live with my sister. My sister agrees and I move out. Life was good for a bit, till I started missing my dad. I felt like I failed him, so after 2 years living with my sister, I decided to move back in with my dad. Almost on arrival, my stepmom starts her shit all over again. Comments like, "Great, more unneeded doctor visits," or "No skateboarding, don't want your sister calling the CPS again." It was actually my aunt that called, I found out years later. On the day before my 17th birthday, I will never forget the words that came out of her mouth. I was getting breakfast and made a comment on how the house was starting to reek with a cigarette smoke smell. I'll admit at this point I was a bit snarky, but I said it to myself. Stepmom wasn't in the room, but she heard me all right. She storms in and tells me, "If you don't like it, then go back to your sister's house. Or did she kick your whiny ass out, and that's why you're back?" I snapped and told her to fuck off and to commit S-word. She walked up to me and looked down at me. She's a good foot taller than I am. I'm pretty damn short. And says, "You do it. I fucking dare you." I stare at her in disbelief and she just starts laughing. "Fucking pussy, you're weak. Just like your mom." At this point, I have a death grip on my fork with every intention of sticking it in her throat, but I don't. I keep quiet and continue eating my breakfast. That was the first of many comments about my mom. Seems she took a page from her own kids that used to say the very similar insults. Only thing is, she was supposedly my mom's best friend. I call her out on this and she tells me to fuck off and die. Because of the years of mental abuse, I become depressed. S-word was on my mind a lot, and she knew it. She egged me on, telling me to say hi to my mom in hell when I get there. She would get drunk and say the most horrible things like, "I hope Satan makes your mom put cigarette butts out on your face for eternity." After a while of this, I made a, I can't say this word on YouTube, but he made a rope to commit S-word with, measured the rope and tied it to a wooden beam on my ceiling. One night I tried to commit S-word. The wooden beam above me broke, and obviously I survived. I took this as a sign that maybe I'm not the one that needs to die. Eventually, I end up finding my dad's gun after a few days of snooping in his room when no one was home. I hid it in my room and kept telling myself on repeat, "Next time she's blind drunk." Well, a friend came over one night and we began talking a bit. I told him I was fed up and that I had a plan. I didn't go into details, but he's a smart person. He was able to figure out what I was planning pretty easily. He began crying to me. He pled for me not to go through with anything and to move back into my sister's house. This went on for quite a bit, but eventually he talked me out of it. I showed him the gun and he snatched it so fast and took off out of my house and down the road to the lake. He tossed that motherfucker as hard as he could into the water. Somehow seeing that made me feel better. Anyways, I realize this is pretty anticlimactic, but after that, I just ended up moving back in with my sister. No one in the family has any contact with my dad or his wife anymore, and at this point, I think that's his choice. It's been over 10 years since then. I've moved across the country to numerous different states. I've made a career and name for myself. I got married to my dream girl, and we have the best little girl together. Things could not be better. Last I heard, stepmom's two youngest are in rehab centers, and stepmom had a massive heart attack that almost killed her. Surprised me that she even has a heart. Karma, I'm guessing. Anyways, that's my life. Laid it all out in its poorly written glory. I'm sure some people won't buy this, but I honestly didn't put this here for anyone else other than myself, so it's no skin off my back. Take what you want from this whole thing as you will. I'm just glad to get this off my chest one way or another, and grateful that I had an amazing friend that was able to help me out of my darkest places. And at the end, he really outlined two very important things. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Your life can always get better. I mean, it looked very bleak for him at one point, trying to commit S-word himself and then trying to murder his stepmom. I mean, two horrible things that presented opportunities to him, but he got through it. He got through the bleak time. He got through the bad time. And if you're going through anything even similar or not even similar, but even no matter how bad it is, how depressed you are, how bad or horrible of a situation you are in, you can get out and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And also, the second thing that he outlined was talking to somebody. He talked to his friend, and his friend saved his life because he would have been in prison for the rest of his life. And so, that's two very important things that I just want to outline. Talk to somebody. If you're going through something, please talk to somebody. I've said it in multiple videos beforehand. If you have nobody to talk to, reach out at the email. My email in the description of this video or in my about section. But yeah, you should never resort to any of these extremes. And there is always another option. So if you're in a situation like this, just keep going. It will get better. And talk to somebody, because that can definitely, make your situation a lot better and alleviate a lot of the stress on your shoulders. I've been diagnosed with a terminal disease. I haven't and don't want to tell my friends and family. Sup fam, longtime lurker. Don't know why I'm posting this. Maybe it's the alcohol. Maybe it's that I'm tired. Really tired. So here's my story. Some months back, I was hospitalized with pneumonia, and I spent a week in the ICU. My bloody lung had collapsed. Long story short, I'm in my 30s. Always been pretty fit. One of those annoying assholes that loves to get drunk and run marathons the next morning. But landed myself in the hospital, and after extensive tests, the docs found I had scar tissue on my lungs. My family and friends came to see me, but at the time, nothing really serious was discovered, besides a deflated lung and pneumonia. I hate when people worry, so I tend to downplay anything serious. Now fast forward a few months. After lots of scans and tests, I've got pulmonary fibrosis. Basically, my lungs ain't so bueno. It's still in the early stages, so I don't have to be on oxygen yet. But this is it for me, kiddos. Never thought I'd go out because of my lungs. Always figured it'd be a heart attack or getting stabbed by a tweaker in an alley. What's funny is I'm not really mad about it. People talk about fighting disease. I've been in plenty of scraps. I've taken life. I've seen life taken. This isn't like that. Not at all. When it's your time, it just is. I feel like a fraud, a liar. I know people around me can tell things aren't okay, but I don't want to talk about it, I've seen too many people die too slowly. What happens to people around them is agony. I've always been the strong one, but right now, I feel pathetically weak. I hate being dishonest. everyone around me has so much shit going on, they don't need to deal with this too. So I'm telling you, my digital compatriots that gaze into this digital ether, I'm a coward, but that's okay. 10 years ago today, I almost executed a plan to murder my brother. I always considered myself the fuck up of the family, and this victim mentality really didn't do me any favors. My brother and I had kind of a rough start of it. Both parents underemployed, father alcoholic, mother depressed, and sort of checked out of reality. We were latchkey kids, basically raising ourselves. I kind of decided life was over before it began, but my brother was, like, I don't know if he was oblivious to the whole situation or if it fortified him, but he was just driven from day one. He was the younger brother, which made it even worse for me. While I was failing classes and getting teased and disappointing everyone, he was crushing it at everything he even gave a try. Phenomenal athlete, math whiz, everyone liked him, and somehow he actually managed to be a good person on top of all of that. At the time, I thought everything came incredibly easy to him, so I didn't acknowledge any of the backbreaking hard work he had to put in to be that kind of guy. The resentment built up for the years, and eventually I became pretty alienated from my family. That's when I got into the party lifestyle, and from there gambling. It started as the group I'd fallen in with, always hitting casinos for cheap drinks and fast girls, but quickly became an obsession for me. They liked the games, I loved it, to the point that I lost the friends and just hung out at the casino all the time. Meanwhile, my brother was building this tremendous small business and making out really well for himself. Eventually, I hit bottom, or what I thought was bottom, after losing every last cent of borrowed money and having to leave town. I went to my brother, in earnest at the time, and begged him to just give me one more chance. He was so incredible. He got me into a program and helped me get clean. He got me a job at his business. He even let me live with him despite the fact that his fiance definitely hated my guts. But he didn't know about my gambling. I never told him. I stayed on the straight and narrow for a while, but after about a year, I just convinced myself that he wasn't doing any of these things, the job, the rehab, the room, out of kindness, but out of condescension. I grew to despise him and my whole life around him, even though it was exponentially happier and healthier than anything previous in my adult life, though I was too blind to see it. I felt beholden to him and figured that's what he wanted. At no time did it occur to me he wanted me to get on my own 2 feet and just be his brother. I figured if I was too cynical to do the same for him, why would he do it for me? I couldn't cope with the shame and remorse and anger oscillating inside. One moment I'd feel crippling rage. The next I'd be overwhelmed with guilt for being so ungrateful. Then I'd be angry at him for making me guilty. The thrill of hitting a big win was my only release. It made me feel successful and worthwhile and independent and gave me the sense of hope that nothing else at that point could. A lump sum of cash seemed like the answer to most of my problems, with the answer to the rest being a bigger lump sum. But it wasn't even really about the money so much at that point. I already had the best job I'd ever had before. It was the beautiful women, the free stuff, you know? You just feel like a movie star when you're on a run in a halfway decent casino. And you would only have to do the bare minimum to make me feel special in the moment because I felt so low in the rest of my life. After about a year and a half, I thought my brother might be getting suspicious because I was making good money at my job, but never seemed to buy anything fancy or make a move towards my own place. My presence was definitely causing strain on his marriage, and he was probably anxious to kick me out without forcing me back to my old lifestyle. So one day I told him I'd gotten an apartment and I took off. I was actually homeless. Some nights the casino would give me a room, but by that point I rarely had enough money to attract attention. I started borrowing from shadier and shadier people. My friends had learned their lesson about lending me anything of value, and most weren't even talking to me anymore. Or I cut contact with them in a rage when they refused to lend me money. In my eyes, at the time, they had so much, and there was no reason they couldn't kick me a few bucks. They were just greedy assholes. Yeah, I was a mess. but I always managed to pay back what I'd borrowed or get away from the lenders before anything too serious happened until I couldn't. An escort I was spending a fair deal of time with back then vouched for me to some friends of hers that I was good for a loan. I took out more than I usually would. I was sick of being homeless and convinced myself if I could just get enough capital to work with, I could get in a nice place and sell my paintings for a living and have a nice, comfortable life. I was prepared to do whatever it took to make that night be the last night of living that way. And I kept telling myself next time was going to be it. Things would turn around. I was about to start winning again. It was statistics. I had to win the next one. I took more risks than I usually would and dipped into my emergency fund and put myself in a really bad position. I lost it all. It was more borrowed money than I'd ever lost, and I knew I was fucked. I was given a very clear ultimatum as to when I had to return the money. They knew way too much about me via the escort who recommended me for any hope of skipping out. Plus, unlike the smaller guys I dealt with before, mostly friends, friends of friends, employers, or wannabes, these weren't the type of people to so easily forget a big loan. I spent the first couple of days calling in favors. I didn't really have any favors to call, so that didn't really help me. Only one guy even took my call, and that was just to tell me no, nicely. Then I started thinking I'd end things, but I was just such a narcissistic, bad person back then that within 12 hours of planning how I'd do it, I thought, this is really my brother's fault that I'm in this position. Why should I have to pay for what he did to me? He's been holding me down my whole life. I was so out of my mind back then that I don't know what the thought process leading up to that could have even been. But the only one of our parents we spoke to was dead, so I figured there must be something for me in the will. He didn't have any kids yet. We talked about the end of our life at some point, and he'd strongly hinted he'd leave something for me. Despite his success, he lived pretty frugally, so I couldn't just snatch his car or anything to handle this. I wasn't smart enough and didn't have enough time to embezzle. I figured I could make it seem like a robbery gone bad. I was nowhere near smart enough, even in a lucid state, to pull that off. I don't know what I was thinking. I made a spectacularly half-assed, nonsensical plan and was going to wait outside his house. He, or rather his fiancée, made me give back the key when I moved out and just go for it. My plan involved me showing up before he got home from work and did not take into account what I'd do if he were to come home early for whatever reason. So as I was approaching the house, he was out back doing some repairs and he recognized me. I don't know if my height and build are that distinct or he knew my shoes or what, because I was wearing a mask and he immediately came around and say, "Hey, is that you? Come on in here. I was just fixing to go out. Have you eaten yet?" I was still far enough away that I guess he didn't register that I was lurking around in the dark with a mask, but I ripped it off and something just overtook me. I was at the absolute peak of my stress levels and in a delirium. I just broke down. For maybe the first time in my life since he was a baby, I saw my brother in a wholly positive light and as a refuge rather than a threat. And I just collapsed crying. I told him my whole payment situation. He consoled me and took me inside and worked out an agreement in which he paid off the people in question contingent on me entering treatment. He had no idea about my gambling problem before then. From then on, thanks to a lot of therapy and GA, I managed to heal from the whole clusterfuck that was the beginning of my life. My brother knows about everything now, the feelings of resentment, the lies, but not this. I've still never told anyone this. I almost talked about it in my last meeting, but I just can't bring myself to talk about it. I'm far too ashamed. And I'm always worried if I say it, even one place out loud, someone might know my brother and feel compelled to tell him. Even though I would never in my right mind, which I am now, consider doing something like that. My brother would have no reason to believe it. I almost told him on step 5 and again on step 9, but I figured it would fall under the cause injury to category. Basically means that it is something that would be more hurtful to tell him than to let him go on not knowing, because he's already had so much hurt and betrayal in his life. He genuinely trusts me now. He's happier for that, and it took years to get to that point. It might make me feel better to tell him, but it would probably be just one more burden for him to carry. I almost told him today, thinking enough time had passed. It had to be all right, but I thought about it and realized, he stands to gain nothing. It would really be so much more for me than for him. I love him so much, and I'll never forgive myself for spitting in the face of his kindness for so many years. I could never tell him. But at the same time, it definitely creates a wedge between us. I've thought about it more than once. I couldn't ever take the risk. He's the best thing I'll ever have. I've just got to put that all behind me. I think this helped me think through it, though. I don't know. Thanks for reading if you did get this far. Oh, and if you need help, do try a meeting. My brother dragging me into one surely saved my life. I'll drop a list of national hotlines in the comments. My rich dad lost it all. So I'm 24 female. I come from a very privileged place, and I can't really talk about that with my friends because I'm not really sure there will be any left after that, so I'm saying that here. My dad made his money because he was in tech when no one was. Like, he started working in the 90s and got involved in the creation of so many major companies, it's actually insane. He made millions from it. And today, he's now about to be homeless. So how did he do such a magic trick, you may ask? Addiction is not your friend. I'm pretty sure my dad has them all. Alcohol, gambling, drugs. When I was little, it was pretty well known that we had money. And I mean, pretty easy to see. I had an amazing apartment with a beautiful view, a castle for the weekend, and various summer houses. We were always traveling to exclusive places. I had my first Chanel bag when I was 9, my first Rolex at 12. But behind the scenes, everything was bad. My mom left my dad when I was 4 because he was beating us when he was drunk. And from that moment on, well, he wasted everything. It started to be well known in his line of work that he wasn't reliable for partying too much, not showing to some important meetings, etc. For that, people got less inclined to work with him, and rightfully so. But even with that, he was settled for life in theory. For some strange reason, he stopped paying his taxes. Like, I don't know, he just didn't feel like it anymore. Well, that's what got him in the end. Also the crazy gambling, but a casino can't cease you. The state can. So little by little, everything got sold, and now they came for where we lived, and we lost that too. In a month, he'll be in the streets without a job. I've still got 1 year left of uni that don't really know how I'm going to pay for. A trust fund isn't a thing in my country, and I don't really have anything to my name, but I'm about to be a doctor, so I'm not too worried for me. My dad, on the other end, I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, it just is hard to comprehend how you can go from having it all to nothing. Piece of advice: don't drink and pay your taxes. And I mean, wow, that's just such a depressing story, and who knows what happened to the OP's father, because I don't know how you can deal with the weight of knowing you had it all and you're homeless now. Like, what do you even do at that point? Truly, like, that is like just rock. I don't know how you even recovered from that. So I hope OP's father's doing the best he can, but I mean, this is a great lesson. Once again, I mean, we've covered multiple confessions in today's video about addiction, and this just goes to show that nobody is, invincible to addiction. Addiction can tear anybody down. Whether you have millions or whether you have $5 in your pocket, addiction can ruin your life. You can have it all and it can go to nothing. So just everyone watching, just take this as a lesson and a moral of a story. Addiction is a slippery slope, and even if you have millions of dollars to protect yourself, it still may never be enough. So just, please be responsible, everyone watching, with drinking, drugs, gambling, etc., or just don't do it. Because basically the only thing that can stem from it is bad. But yeah, just a great moral of the story. And with that last one, that wraps up some terrifying Reddit confession threads. What were your guys' thoughts on this video? This video was very heavy, very depressing, very sad, and I think a lot of lessons to be learned here. I really do think that these confessions and stories can teach you a lot. It's taught me a lot just reading through people's experiences on what I should and shouldn't do throughout my life, and it's really impacted me. So hopefully some of these confessions impacted you as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the world. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out some other videos on the channel. I'm sure you'll enjoy those. And I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world. And yeah, this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some terrifying stories from Reddit. And oh boy, these are some of the scariest, creepiest, and just downright most terrifying stories I have ever read. They had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, so you're gonna want to make sure to stick around. And I appreciate you stopping by. It means the world. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel subscriber goal is 1 million subscribers before the end of the year, so please subscribe. And also please consider following my Instagram and following the show on Spotify. It really does mean the world. And yeah, this video will be long enough already, so sit back, relax, grab a drink or grab a snack. And without further ado, let's get into some terrifying stories from Reddit. I'm staying in a town where everyone seems obsessed with someone called Mr. Jangles. Written by Eldon. People say small towns hold on to their stories longer than they should. If that's true, then I'm sure Maywood Mills has white-knuckled its grip on theirs. You probably haven't heard of this place. I don't blame you. I hadn't either. Not until a couple of weeks back. And now that I'm here, I understand why. It's as if the rest of the world quietly agreed to forget Maywood Mills ever existed. And my gut says the town prefers it that way. As I write this, I've locked myself in a rented room above a bar. It reeks of dried liquor and bleach in here. I'm trying my best not to think about the people who've stayed here before me, or what they did between these walls. If that wasn't enough, the neon sign outside my window keeps sputtering in and out, painting the room sickly green. It's going to give me an epileptic seizure any minute now. I also jammed a chair under the doorknob, as I was instructed, just to be sure. Before I go to bed, I'm going to try to lay out everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. I apologize if I sound dramatic. I've covered some dark stuff in my life, met a lot of broken people, but honestly, I'm lost. I've never seen anything like this. I can usually tell if there's a rational spine running through a story within the first hour of digging into it, but here, I can't find it. There's a legend buried in this town, a story that's been told so many times it seems to have hardened into truth. Yeah, the story doesn't just seem to live here, it seems to fester. It's easier if I start from the beginning. It was Carla who found the town first, my colleague. She drove in yesterday, texted me the route, and said she'd find a place to stay. We were supposed to drive up together, but life happened, I guess. I screwed things up. That's the short version. I ended up spending the night in the hospital. Broken arm. 3 places. Don't ask. Anyway, I said I'd meet here in the morning instead. Our plan was simple. Find Maywood Mills, dig into the string of disappearances that had plagued the area for nearly 2 decades, and, more than anything, reopen the case that once had the town in the papers. Nadine Wiles, 13 years old, 1998. Poor girl had been stabbed many times. More times than anyone who worked the original case ever felt comfortable saying out loud. The photos speak for themselves. They found her laid out on a flat rock deep in the woods. Whoever did it didn't even try to hide their work. There were no leads. Cops couldn't find any suspects, which left the community without any answers. Rumors took over. That buzzing hearsay that creeps in when humans realize they don't know what's lurking in the dark. Eventually, the case went cold. Officially forgotten. We came here to open it back up. Or at least, that's what I told them. Maywood Mills isn't on most maps. You take the ferry out of Seattle, drive west past Port Angeles, and somewhere along the Olympic foothills, the road ends. After that, it's old logging routes that snake through fog-choked forest, narrow lanes, cracked asphalt, and treacherous curves. I never thought praying for guardrails would be on my bingo card, but there I was wishing for them. Blink and you'll miss the turnoff. Keep driving and you'll dead end at some old dam. That's what Carla texted me. So obviously, my GPS gave up halfway, and she wasn't answering her phone. So I had to navigate the foothills by myself, one hand on the wheel, the other in a cast, playing chicken with blind corners. I'd like to see Schumacher try. Somewhere outside the town limits, I nearly wrecked my Porsche. The pavement was slick from yesterday's torrential rain. A turn came up fast. I got distracted by a message on the phone, some legal bullshit that's been chewing on my ankles for weeks. I got angry, lost focus, swerved, came a few feet shy of turning myself into tree decor. That's when I got my first real sense of the place. I hadn't even reached the town yet, but something already felt off. I staggered out of the car and threw up on the shoulder. Then everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like an eerie silence. The kind of silence I imagine falls in a jungle when a predator stalks its prey. The trees, insects, birds, even the nearby river. It was like the entire forest held its breath. Then, somewhere in the distance, the dam released a sheet of water with a treacherous roar. I nearly leaped out of my skin. That's when I saw it. A moss-covered sign slumping in the brush. Welcome to Maywood Mills. I looked through the case files scattered across the passenger seat. I had an old photograph of the same sign, from 30 years ago. Back then, the paint was fresh, the letters straight. Someone cared back then, but I guess they had every right to stop. I've always had a strange pull towards towns like this. I couldn't tell you exactly why. Maybe it's because I grew up in the noise, traffic, sirens, shrieking subway brakes. I'm a city rat by design, but places like this, they hum with a certain promise. You could disappear here. You could be a nobody. No headlines, no pressure, no past dogging your heels. There was peace to be found. However, the charm wears thin the longer you look, because underneath the quiet, there's this weight. Like the atmosphere itself wants you to shrink, to stay small, to forget there's a world beyond the woods. Nobody says it out loud, but you can feel the rules immediately. Dreaming is illegal here. Curiosity is an offense. They don't like people leaving, and they like people arriving even less. That's what kills the dream for me. Not the isolation, not the decay, the people. As I drove in, nobody waved, nobody smiled. They just watched me roll past, faces blank and weathered, carved like worn gravestones. The only thing alive was their eyes, full of resentment and something else. Something heavy I couldn't place at first. Suspicion, grief, maybe fear. Or maybe it was just the big yellow letters FBI on my jacket that spooked them. Maywood Mills itself didn't offer much to look at. A couple dozen houses, most of them sagging or boarded up, a handful of stubborn businesses clinging to life. There was a school and a church that had seen better days, and of course, a bar. As if the depressing atmosphere wasn't poisonous enough. However, there was one thing that really caught my attention: the graffiti. Spray painted across abandoned storefronts, rusting garage doors, and brick walls was the same image over and over. A face, a crude drawing of a tall skeletal figure in a long coat and top hat. His eyes were black, empty hollows. On some of the portraits, he was almost a skull. Then he had this wide, childish grin that stretched ear to ear. It really got under my skin for some reason. Most of the time, he was drawn holding a ring of keys. Not a few keys like the ones you and I own. No, it was a massive, jangling hoop of them. If you remember the keymaker from The Matrix, you'll know exactly what I mean. I parked outside the bar. The whole building looked like it was one good gust away from collapsing. I doubted they'd cleaned the taps since the Reagan administration, but hey, beer is beer. And I'm not picky. Plus, I noticed they rented out rooms upstairs. If Carla was anywhere in this town, odds were she'd be here. The very moment I stepped inside, the ongoing conversations died mid-sentence. It looked exactly the way I imagined it. Wood-paneled walls, floorboards that stuck to your shoes, a few regulars slumped around the edges, and a jukebox that clearly lost the will to live. The floor creaked as I approached the bar. I flashed my badge, ordered a beer, and slid a photo across the counter. Carla's face stared up between the bartender and me. "She came in yesterday," I said. "Have you seen her?" The bartender, her name was Lucy, took her time with the photo. Meanwhile, I studied her. She was way too pretty to be marooned in a town like this. Finally, she shook her head. "Can't say I have." Then, after a beat, "Sorry, but no outsiders have come through here in weeks, maybe months." Her eyes came up to meet mine. "What brings the FBI to Maywood Mills?" "We're reopening an old case," I told her. Nadine Wiles. That name hit the room like a bell tone. Conversations that I just started picking up fell silent again. I could hear the drunks in the corner shift in their seats. Glasses paused halfway to meet their mouths. I felt their eyes burn in the back of my neck. One of them even stood up like he meant to leave, then thought better of it. Lucy didn't react much, but something shifted behind her eyes. Sadness, I think. She was hard to read. Then she nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting for this to happen. "Figured someone would come back around eventually," she said. "Why didn't you or your partner come in together?" I glanced down at the cast around my arm and tapped it lightly. Got delayed. Long story. She glanced down at it, said nothing. It almost made me uncomfortable, so I steered us back to the subject. "So, Nadine Wiles, you knew her?" "Sure, everyone did," she said. "We went to the same school, all of us did." She gestured to the drunks in the corner who were still staring at me. "Listen, you're not exactly digging through pleasant memories. Countless investigators have been here over the years, cops, journalists, or crime junkies. And none of them got anywhere?" I asked. "We already know who did it," she said. "Who?" She nodded past my shoulder. "He's right behind you." I turned. Out the window, across the cracked parking lot, sprayed across the brick wall, that painted face stared right back at me. "That?" I said, trying not to sound amused. "You're saying that thing killed Nadine?" She nodded. One of the drunks, a handyman, barked a laugh and swiveled on his stool. "Hell, he's behind all the weird shit that happens around here. Half this town swears they've seen him, especially after a few drinks." He laughed. So did his friends. Lucy leaned a little closer, voice low enough to cut under the noise. "Ignore them. They've been here since breakfast, but unfortunately, they're not wrong." She held my gaze. "I'm sorry, Agent, but you're chasing a ghost." I didn't know what to say. Lucy pointed toward a map taped beside the register and showed me the quickest route to the nearest motel. Said Carla might have checked in there. It felt like a nice and subtle way of saying, leave. So I didn't. There were vacant rooms upstairs. Nothing close to 5 stars, but if Carla had checked into some motel miles away for a bit of luxury, she had another thing coming. This town is where the conversations were. This was where work was. So instead of heading for the door, I ordered steak and eggs and a room for the night. While Lucy disappeared into the kitchen, the handyman peeled himself off his stool and shuffled over. He was in his mid-40s, with a bloated red face, breath sour with Miller Lite. He sat down beside me without asking. "His name's Mr. Jangles," he said, jerking his chin toward the fogged window. "Nadine Wiles was his first, back in '98. All the kids said it was him. Lives out in the woods past the dam. Nobody ventures out there alone anymore." "Mr. Jangles," I repeated, trying not to let the skepticism show too much. "That's right. That's what they called him. They say he has keys to every house in Maywood. That's how you know he's close. You hear him." He mimed the sound, shaking his wrist a little. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. More barking from his friends. I looked back through the window at that damned face, the top hat, the smile, the black empty sockets. I have to admit, it creeped me out a little. "So, the Bureau's chasing campfire stories now?" he asked, squinting. I let the question hang. "Urban legends don't bother me. Lies do," I said eventually. "We're here for the truth." He let out a dry smoker's chuckle and tapped the bar with his dirty fingers right on the badge I'd left resting beside my glass. "Might want to get that fixed," he said. "It's chipped." I glanced down. He wasn't wrong. The edge was scuffed, the cheap laminate curling just a little. I palmed it without saying anything. Lucy came back and set the plate down in front of me. "If you're serious about digging into this," she said, "talk to Mrs. Wiles. She's still out on the edge of the town. Pink house, you can't miss it. She keeps to herself." She hesitated, then added, "And do me all a favor. Don't tell her I sent you." I finished my food and headed back out. The sky looked bruised, like the rain was thinking about coming back. I followed Lucy's directions along a cracked road, snapping a few photos of Mr. Jangles on the way. I couldn't wait to hear what Carla would make of all this. Lucy was right. The house was impossible to miss. Faded pink siding, shutters hanging crooked. Even in the middle of the afternoon, the curtains were drawn. The yard was crowded with the remains of a life that used to be loving and busy. Material for an abandoned treehouse, rusted tools, a collapsing stroller, a weather-beaten swing set. It broke my heart a little. I'll fast forward through most of it. You've seen the scene before. A grieving mother loses her child, blames the world, and shuts the door on it. Nothing new there. But I walked away with 2 things, or 3 if I'm being honest. First, she gave me a USB drive. Said it contained everything they managed to pull from Nadine's old computer. According to her, Nadine recorded a message that day before she died. Second, Mrs. Wiles didn't talk about Mr. Jangles the way the guys at the bar did. No jokes, no eye rolling. No. She spoke of him like any other suspect I've come across. And then there was the last thing. While she went to her bedroom to look for the USB, my eyes wandered around Nadine's room. I found her old diary from the summer she died tucked in the back of a shelf. I shouldn't have taken it, but I did. Mrs. Wiles came back a minute later and pressed the USB into my good hand. "You should barricade your door tonight, Agent," she said. "Shut your blinds. If someone knocks, don't answer. Stay still. Don't look out if you hear anything." So, that was my day. By the time I headed back, the sun was dying behind the tree line. I called Carla again. She didn't answer. What the hell is she up to? I'll drive out to that motel tomorrow if I have to. I'm going to need her on this. She's the charming one. the one people usually open up to. I'm better at the technical stuff and pushing people over the edge. Oh, and one last thing. I checked the USB. I've only ever seen photos of Nadine with 19 stab wounds in her body, so it was strange, wrong almost, to see her alive. I felt like I was watching a ghost, but there she was on my screen, sitting cross-legged on her bed like any other kid after school. She looked straight into the camera. "He came back today," she said, during break. "He wanted me to introduce him to the other kids." She smiled. "I wrote a poem," she said, "for him." She began to read. As I was walking through the park, I saw a figure in the dark. His mask was white, his eyes like coal. A chilling sight that froze my soul. He wore a hat upon his head, and from his mouth no words were said. He danced for me with jangling keys, and whispered secrets in the breeze. Mr. Jangles, tall and grim, would find the children calling him. He'd come for those who dared to stray, to never see the light of day. I think someone just tried the handle on my door. I couldn't hear any footsteps in the hall, but the door definitely rattled. Someone tried to get in. A moment later, I heard a set of keys jingle downstairs. Maybe Lucy's locking up the bar and wanted to check on me. I mean, what else could it be? That's the story I'm choosing. Anyway, I need to fix the badge before I go to sleep. They say small towns hold on to their stories longer than they should. Out here, I'm starting to think that the story holds on to the town. Tomorrow, I'm gonna find Carla. I'll probably swing by the school too. The teachers must know something. I need to gather as much material as I can before someone figures out who I am. Before someone catches me in the lie. Carla wasn't at the motel. I didn't drive out to check. I called. Spoke to the front desk. They said she never checked in. Never even passed through. And of course, now I know why. I woke up later than I meant to. Not sure if it was exhaustion or the stillness of this place, or maybe just the fact that my body's finally catching up to the pain. Just before I went to bed, my arm throbbed like hell. I'd left the painkillers in the car and stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, debating whether it was worth it. Then I heard her voice in my head. "Mrs. Wiles, barricade your door. Don't look out. Don't answer if someone knocks." And after what happened just 30 minutes earlier, after someone actually tried to enter my room, well, I bit down and wrote out the pain. Lucy was already behind the bar when I came down, setting up for the day. She had a plate waiting for me. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, black coffee. Said she figured I'd need it. I didn't argue. As I sat down, I asked her when she locked up the bar last night. She said just after midnight. It checked out. She smirked as she set an expired ketchup bottle on the counter. "What?" she asked. "Did you hear something, Agent?" I lifted my coffee, held it there for a second. "I believe you already answered that question," I said. "I heard you locking up. That's all." She raised an eyebrow, leaned on the bar. "He checks in from time to time, you know. New faces tend to wake him from his sleep." "That's so. What usually draws him out? Mischief? Parking violations?" "Lying," she said, smile fading. "He doesn't like lies." I froze, the fork with egg and bacon halfway to my lips. She looked at me for a second too long, like she was trying to see something beneath my skin. "You're actually serious about him?" I countered, and bit down. "Of course," she said. "I've met him." She told me it was Nadine who introduced them to each other, just a few months before Nadine was murdered. Nadine had been drawing pictures of him in class. Lucy got curious, so Nadine asked her to come home with her after school. Lucy hadn't believed her at first, thought it was just another stupid prank kids play when they're bored and want to scare each other. But Nadine insisted, so she led Lucy down to the creek, and there he was, Mr. Jangles. She said he was crouched at the edge of the water, rising grime from his hat. He was dressed exactly like in the drawings. His long coat trailed into the shallows, soaking at the edges, but he didn't seem to mind. When he saw them, he straightened. She told me she'd never seen anything like it. He just kept rising, unfolding, until he must have been 8 feet tall. He stared at Lucy. He didn't speak, neither did the forest. She said everything went quiet all at once. Then he bowed and began to dance. A slow, delicate movement. Not joyful, not menacing. It was somber, like a ballet dancer performing at a funeral. "See?" Nadine had whispered to her. And when the dance was over, he bent down, picked a single flower growing by the stream, and offered it to Lucy. I didn't press her for more. There was nothing to gain. I just felt sorry for her. They were clearly busting my balls or just being completely delusional. That's the thing about local legends. They start as fiction, patches people stitch together when reality doesn't make sense. But tell a story long enough and it stops feeling like one. Eventually, it becomes the only explanation that fits. Was I starting to believe in him? No, but I was looking for patches to stitch. And right now, Mr. Jangles was the only lead I had. So, at least he's earned a place in my head. I thanked her for the food and stepped outside. That's when I saw my car. It sagged to one side, the bumpers practically kissing the pavement. The whole thing looked crooked. It took me a few seconds to realize the front tires had been slashed. Yeah, I know a knife puncture when I see one, and I sure as hell didn't hit a nail on the way in. No, these were clean, deliberate cuts, deep gouges, a precise kind of vandalism. Rage came up fast and stupid, same as 2 days ago. For a moment, I forgot how I ended up in the hospital. I was on a collision course to repeat my mistake. I stormed back into the bar. I could take the side eyes, the muttering, and all the other small town bullshit, but someone messing with my Porsche? That crossed a line. My arm might be out of commission, but the other one still works just fine. Lucy calmed me down, but she wasn't surprised. Probably the local skater kids, she said. They don't see cars like that around here. Then, without missing a beat, people don't like strangers who make noise in Maywood. If you're going to stick around, I suggest you do a better job of blending in. She had a point. Since I was unable to drive, she lent me a phone. And that's when I called the motel. With no luck tracking down Carla, Lucy helped me get the car towed to the only mechanic in town, Dale Thompson. 50s, oil-stained coveralls, grip like a wrench wrapped in sandpaper. I remembered him from the bar yesterday. He's the one who stood up when I mentioned Nadine, but then decided to stay. He gave the tires a quick glance and scratched his head. 2 days, he said. We're slammed. I looked around the shop. It was empty. I can, see that, I muttered. He held my stare a moment too long, like he was waiting to see if I had something more clever to say. I folded. Whatever game they were playing, I wasn't going to win it by pissing off the only guy who could get me back on the road. With no car and still no sign of Carla, I had no other choice but to start on my own. Rain was a few hours out, so I hiked into the woods toward the spot where Nadine Wile's body was found. The distance wasn't far, but the walk dragged. Maybe I'd just been out in nature too long, but forests like these have a way of stretching space. Every turn looks the same, Every tree, every rock, and, of course, everything was wet. That deep, bone-soaking damp that seeps into your shoes and socks and stays there. The ground was soft and waterlogged, every step sinking just enough to remind me that comfort was far behind me. Did I have anything positive to say? I guess the forest was beautiful. There's something about the way trees and animals come alive after rain. But they knew how little dry time they had left, and so did I. I stopped by a shallow creek and held the crime scene photo up to a moss-covered rock. It was the same one, sunken into the earth like an altar. As I mentioned before, Nadine was laid out on it. 19 stab wounds, arms, legs, torso, throat, head. Whoever did it wasn't in a rush, didn't panic, didn't try to hide what was done. They stood here and they took their time. Sure picked a beautiful place for it. I'll tell you this, if Mr. Jangles really exists, if he actually did this, then he's not a ghost story. He's a sadist. I took notes as I moved through the clearing, retracing the scene, tried to picture how it happened. The original cops never agreed on the basics, where she was killed, where she bled out, whether this rock was the murder site or just the stage. Sloppy work if you ask me. Or maybe just fear disguised as incompetence. Then I noticed something in the mud. A few shoe prints. Women's size 10. Carla wears a 10. I knew that because she once borrowed a pair of my joggers and joked they fit her better than they did me. I crouched down to take a closer look, and that's when I realized it had gone quiet again. No wind, no birds, no sound at all. Then I heard it. Keys. Dozens of them. Clinking. Shifting. Moving between the trees. I spun around, looked everywhere, but there was nothing. Just me, the creek, and the rock. Then, all at once, the forest exhaled. The sounds came rushing back, along with something else. Something I hadn't heard before. Children's laughter. I followed an old game trail through the trees and realized I was closer to the school than I thought. Maywood Mills Elementary, tucked just behind the tree line. I approached the chain link fence. Kids ran across the cracked blacktop in chaotic zigzags, lost in their own fantasy. That's when I saw it. Chalk. Drawn into the hopscotch squares, his face. His godforsaken face. The kids were hopping back and forth on it, chanting Nadine's rhyme. Staring at kids like that might get you in trouble. The voice came from behind me. A woman, early 30s. Warm eyes, cardigan over a frayed dress. Holly Rogan, she said. I'm the teacher here. I introduced myself, flashed the badge. She didn't bother to look at it. Of course she knew who I was. The whole town probably did by now. I gestured to the hopscotch. I don't remember me and my friends going up playing tag around a chalk drawing of Wayne Williams. She looked at the kids, smiling. Would you rather they sit at home, scared, she said? They're kids. Didn't you play Bloody Mary as a kid? I don't remember Bloody Mary being based on someone who actually murdered people. She didn't respond right away. The kids kept playing. I used to think it was just their own little quirky folklore, she said quietly. A story adults pass down to keep the kids out of the woods, but I've been here 5 years now, and I've seen enough to know. She trailed off. Wait, you chose to move here? Why? I asked. She met my eyes. We all have our reasons to disappear, Agent. Then she led me inside and called the kids back to class. I hung back a moment and stared at the hopscotch. As the kids filed past me, one girl stopped. I've seen him, the girl said. I crouched down. You have? She nodded slowly. Here, just a few weeks ago. She pointed to the fence by the woods. Did he say anything to you? I asked her. She looked around. Holly was just up ahead, corralling the other kids back into the building. He asked me to keep a secret, she whispered. What kind of secret? But before she could answer, Holly called her name and she ran, disappeared into the school. Holly came jogging back. Did Cherry tell you any of her stories? She said, half laughing. She just wanted to see my badge. I lied. Holly nodded, then handed me a scrap of paper. Her number. If you find anything at all, please don't hesitate to call. It'd be nice to know we're not all insane. Her fingers lingered against mine as she passed the note, just long enough for me to know it wasn't accidental. Later, I visited the town's police station. It was like stepping into a time capsule. Peeling paint, phones with cords, a stack of unpaid parking tickets from the 90s. The desk sergeant snored himself awake as I walked in. Deputy Horace Green blinked at me like I was his first client in years. I'm looking into the missing persons cases, I said. Which one? He asked. How far back do your records go? Horace leaned back, scratched his patchy red beard. Not far. Fire took most of it a couple of years ago. Of course they did. Mind if I take a look at what you have? He paused. Let me see your badge again. I swallowed hard, pulled it out, held it steady. Horace studied it. A little longer than I liked, but then he shrugged and stood up. I'll check the back. As he disappeared behind the door, I took out my phone. One more try. I dialed Carla. The line rang, and then I heard it. The ringtone. Faint. Echoing from somewhere behind the station. My stomach dropped, but then Horace's voice rang out from the back. Yeah? Honey, I've told you not to call me at work. Yeah, I got a guest. Okay, bye. I exhaled. False alarm. He returned a minute later with a dusty old box. This is what we got. I made my way back to the motel with the files. Out past the tree line, I could see the rain coming. Thick, dark sheets crawling across the treetops. A couple miles off, maybe less. I started romanticizing this evening. Thought about buying a bottle of scotch from Lucy and holding up in my room with the storm. Just me, the flies, and a drink strong enough to give me a good night's rest. Maybe I'd call Holly. I wasn't going to spend the evening with those drunks in the corner booth. Hell, it wouldn't surprise me if they were the ones who slashed my car. The thought made my blood boil over again. No, I thought it was best if I stayed inside tonight. Alone. However, when I got back to my room, I stopped cold. There was a note taped to the door. Just 2 words. The dam. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own breath. The muffled clink of glassware downstairs, the raspy cough from the jukebox. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled. Then I did it. I went out. I shouldn't have. I knew that even as I peeled the note off the door and folded it into my pocket, I should have listened to my gut and waited for daylight to make things feel less intentional. But curiosity has always been my worst habit. The rain hit hard. It came down like a hammer, cold and relentless. Within minutes, I was soaked through. My cheap jacket did its best to keep me warm. The roar of water hitting the canopy got louder with every step, a constant swallowing sound that made it hard to concentrate, like the forest itself was trying to hide whatever was waiting there to attack me in the dark. When I finally reached the dam, my instinct told me to stay back, so I ducked into the brush. The dam looked old, very old. The structure slumped against the earth. Rust bloomed against the iron gates, and half-collapsed steel beams jutted out at odd angles. Moss and rot clung to everything, a monument to erosion, held together by sheer stubbornness. A thin sheet of black water had pooled beneath the structure. That's when I caught the flash of light. I ducked down and squinted through the wet leaves. 2 men were wading deep in the shallows, flashlights sweeping across the water. As my eyes adjusted, I recognized them. It was Horace and the handyman from the bar. They were calm, focused, talking low. Their lights stayed across the dam's surface like they were searching for something just beneath it. Fortunately, they hadn't seen me. I stayed hidden, snapped a couple of photos with my phone, my hand shaking more from adrenaline than the cold. Whatever they were doing, one thing was clear. It wasn't meant to be seen. I didn't wait around to find out more. I turned back and left while I still could. On the way back, I climbed a steep, muddy incline. The rain had carved thin waterfalls through the dirt, washing away leaves and debris, exposing roots and stones that hadn't seen daylight in years. I was one Dilophosaurus away from being Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. That's when something caught my eye. A glint of leather, lodged in the tangled roots of a bush, half buried, caked in mud. I knelt down and brushed away the soil, and a cold weight sank into my gut like wet cement. It was Carla's badge. Damaged, peeling, but her photo was still there. Her face staring up at me through the fogged plastic. She'd been here. That's when the world went quiet again. Not the water, I could still hear that, pounding and endless, but everything else vanished. Then I felt it. Eyes. So I turned. And there he was, a good distance away, standing just inside the tree line. Mr. Jangles. The rain streamed down the tall hat on his head and ran in dark lines along his coat, dripping from the hem like he was melting into the ground. His smile was wide, packed with what looked like hundreds of small, uneven teeth. But worst of all were his eyes. Hollows black as coal, devoid of life, empty pits that seemed to swallow all light around them. He didn't move. He just watched me. Then he began to move. Not a lunge, not a step. No. He danced for me. Slow, controlled, graceful, almost reverent. His arms swept through the air, his feet gliding soundlessly across the soaked forest floor. It was a performance for an audience of one. I couldn't look away. Each movement brought him closer. Not by much, not enough to notice at first, but closer all the same. Then he vanished behind a tree. That's when the cold hit me. The rain, my boots, the ache in my arm, the weight of my body. The world came crashing back all at once. I gasped, stumbled back, and ran. I didn't stop to look over my shoulder. I didn't stop to think. I don't know what took over me, but I ran like my life depended on it. Because whatever that thing was, whatever game he was playing, my gut was certain he wasn't going to bring me flowers. Here I am, happy to report that I'm back in the relative safety of my little rented room. The door is locked. This time, I've wedged a bureau against it. And I'm alive. Freezing, but alive. I spent the last hour going through the files I've got from Horace. and something doesn't add up. The missing people over the years, they weren't just kids. They are teenagers, a woman in her 30s, a couple of elderly men and women. And that's what bothers me. Most serial offenders, killers, kidnappers, they have a type, a demographic they fixate on: age, gender, color. There's usually always a pattern, something that ties the victims together, even if it's not obvious at first. But here, there's no consistency, no common thread I can see. Then again, I guess those are human patterns, and I don't think he's human. Am I starting to believe in him? Am I starting to believe in Mr. Jangles? I saw him in the woods, that's for sure. I won't pretend otherwise. And maybe that's why I'm going to tell you truth, the full truth. You're probably wondering why an FBI agent is panicking in a barricaded motel room instead of calling for backup. Why I haven't brought in more resources. Why I'm not already on the plane with Quantico. Well, I'm not an FBI agent. I'm not a cop. Not even close. And neither was Carla. We host a true crime podcast together, The Dark Report. Maybe you've heard of it. If you have, it was probably for the wrong reasons. One of our episodes went viral last year. The wrong kind of viral. It didn't just stir up controversy, it ruined someone's life. Or took it, I guess. And the fallout has been eating me alive ever since. My inbox is a graveyard of lawsuits. My name is dirt. My reputation, dust. Everyone that I've ever worked with has turned their backs. Hell, I turned my back. I traded my morality for clicks. So yeah, I came here to resurrect my career. The story of Maywood Mills is a story no one has covered before. At least, as far as we could tell. I saw this as my one last shot. A chance to prove I'm more than the asshole who got someone killed. And now, I'm terrified. My instincts may have cost me the only person who ever stood by my side. I don't feel safe anymore. And I don't know what to do. I'm stranded in Maywood Mills. He comes for those who dare to stray, to never see the light of day. Mr. Jangles. They blame him for everything. The disappearances, Nadine, the town's rot. They say he doesn't like lies. Well, I think they're all lying. Carla is gone, and soon, so am I. They were right. It was Mr. Jangles. Just 3 days ago, he was nothing but a story for me. A myth people told each other when the lights went out, or, like I said, a lie. The next day, he became real. And now he's going to be the thing that kills me. I don't know how much time I have left. If this message cuts off, if it just ends, then assume the worst. Assume I didn't make it. I'm not writing this from the safety of my rented room anymore. I'm somewhere else now. I think I know where. I can tell it by the smell. You could practically taste the wet soil, and I can feel the dirty water drip on my legs. There's no reception here at the moment, none at all. So I don't even know if this update will ever reach you, but if it does, never come to Maywood Mills. Not out of curiosity, not out of pity, not because you think you're any smarter than me. Stay the hell away. I'm going to type this out as fast as I can. I'm cold and running out of oxygen. My hands won't stop shaking. This will be my final update. and I'll tell you everything I can. Everything I figured out while I still can. That night, I stormed back to the bar. The regulars were exactly where I'd left them, hunched over their drinks like barnacles clinging to a shipwreck. The jukebox wheezed out the same tired country song. Same dull eyes were staring into half-empty glasses. Nothing had changed for them. But everything had changed for me. The handyman, who I'd find out was called Mickey, and Horace were at their usual table, still soaked from the rain. Mud caked their boots, and their coats dripped onto the floor like the storm had followed them inside. They hadn't been back long. I didn't waste time. I slammed Carla's badge down on the table, hard enough to make the glasses jump. Where is she? I know she's been here. Mickey didn't look up. He just stirred his whiskey like he hoped to find another one of his dirty lies swirling at the bottom. Speak, goddammit, I yelled. He just downed his drink. I opened my mouth to press him further. Then I heard it. Chairs creaking, boots shifting on that god-awful sticky wood. The bar had gone quiet. Everyone was watching me. Mickey finally spoke, slow and gravelly, like I was interrupting something important. Yeah, he said. She came through. Dale saw her. She said her phone was dead, needed a charger. There are no phones here, so we told her what we tell everyone. The next town's a few miles south. She drove off. That's it. That's not it. I heard your friend here speaking to his wife the other day. Landline, Horace muttered with a cheeky grin. You're withholding information from a federal officer, I snapped. Now he looked up at me and smiled. And what are you gonna do about it? He said. Call backup? I froze. I didn't know what to say. I guess authority only works when someone believes in it. The room seemed to lean in. I want to talk to Dale, I finally said. Where is he? Behind me, Lucy's voice cut in, cold and flat. Dale's dead. I turned. Lucy was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes grave. Mickey and Horace just found him, down by the dam. A western rattlesnake got to him, we think. He fell in and drowned. What? My voice cracked. A rattlesnake? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I could feel it now. That heaviness in the room, the thing I'd mistaken for hostility. It was grief. Every eye was on me now. The stranger, the outsider. A low-life trucker in the corner eyed the mud on my boots. No, I'm not joking, Lucy said, sharper now. Come on. She led me down the back hallway, past stacked chairs and crates of liquor. Even here, the smell of bleach stung my nostrils. She opened the cold room door, and there he was. Dale. Pale, bloated, draped across a table like a shot deer. Dirty water slid from his fingertips, dripping onto the tile below. I just stood there, listening to the drops. I couldn't move. My breath got stuck somewhere high in my chest. The air felt thinner, like the room was closing in on me. You've never seen a dead body before, Agent? Lucy asked. Of course I have, I said. It was a lie. I'd seen bodies in photographs and reports and situations where you could look away. This was different. It made me sick. You're soaked, Lucy said, gently now. You're going to get sick. She put a hand on my back. Let's get you to bed, she added. I'll bring you some tea. There was only a few hours left until morning. I didn't sleep through a single one of them. I lay there staring at the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for him to come for me, just like he must have come for Carla and Dale. That was another thing that I couldn't shake. The note on my door. Did Dale write it? Did he want me to meet him there? Or was it Mickey? Horace? Was the note meant as bait? A colder thought crept in. What if they'd mistaken Dale for me in the dark? What if that's the reason he was dead? The idea settled in my gut and refused to leave. Another death I could trace back to myself. I was up to 3 now. My mistakes were starting to stack up. I was practically a serial killer. Yeah. Try sleeping with that on your conscience. The next morning, I was invited to a town meeting. Dale's death had rattled everyone. The room buzzed with anger. Whispers, accusations, fingers pointing at me, eyes scanning me up and down. More than a few people asked if Mr. Jangles had something to do with it. Apparently, he hadn't taken anyone in a while. Except Carla, I thought. I didn't say it out loud. I was afraid of what would happen if I did. I knew I wasn't welcome anymore. I could feel it in the air. I was the outsider who'd brought trouble with him. That stirred their effed up idea of peace. Heads turned toward me. Angry eyes glared at me. Voices sharpened. If Holly hadn't stepped in, put herself between me and the crowd, I think they would have run me out of town right there. The strangest part was how rehearsed it all felt. The outrage, the blame, the fear. It was like they were all reading from the same script. Like the meeting wasn't about Dale at all, but about turning me into the problem. About making sure I packed my bags and left. And if it wasn't, if it was all genuine, would people act this way toward an FBI agent? Or had they all decided that I wasn't one? Either way, one thing was clear. The clock wasn't ticking for me anymore. It was counting me out. I had to act fast. Outside, I ran into Cherry, the girl from the school. I asked her how she was doing. She shook her head and took a step back. I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore, she said. Did your mother teach you not to talk to strangers? She taught me not to talk to you. She giggled. She glanced around, then whispered, I have to keep Mr. Jangles' secret. If I don't, you'll vanish too. Then she ran away. All vanished too? The word stuck with me. Was my gut right? Had I finally brushed up against some kind of truth? The story. The god-awful lie everyone here agreed to live inside. But if that was the case, the work felt impossible. I mean, how can you sniff out the truth in a place built on lies? I came here to find justice for Nadine. But can justice even exist in a place where lies have become the law? Where pretending not to see is the price of survival? Does the truth just rot quietly, patiently, the same way Nadine did? In the same way all those people vanished, out in the open, while everyone else looked straight past it. For the first time, I didn't know what to do. With my car still out of commission, Lucy offered to drive me to the nearest train station. Said they'd have someone else finish the repairs and tow the car to me once it was done. All she needed was my address. Let me tell you, something about giving it to her didn't feel right. At the time, I told myself it was just paranoia. Another symptom of too little sleep and too many unknowns. But then something else awakened in me. Something I said last night in the bar. Tangled up with an unhealthy dose of stubbornness. A need to make things right. Now, laying here in the dark, I realize I should have taken her up on the offer. But I didn't. I was too close. Close enough to feel the truth breathing down my neck. So I decided to stay. That decision came from a hunch. Something I couldn't shake. The phone call I'd made back at the police station. The one I'd almost written off as nothing. A landline? Come on. Really? I just needed to make sure. So I broke in. As the evening fell over Maywood Mills, I waited until Horace left. Then I said, fuck it, and put my elbow through the back window of the police station. The glass gave way with an ugly crack. I climbed inside and peeked back out onto the street. The coast was clear. No shouts, no lights came on. I turned my attention to the station, and there it was, lying by a charger next to a humming fan. Carla's phone. The screen lit up when I touched it. Her lock screen stared back at me. Carla and her daughter, cheek to cheek at the Grand Canyon. My throat tightened. I felt nauseous. Swallowed it down. Every message I'd sent her was there. Every missed call, dozens more from her fiance. I checked her notes. I wasn't sure how long she'd been here before Mr. Jangles took her, but maybe she'd been here long enough to see something I hadn't. She was better at this than me. Always had been. She'd made a note 4 days ago, the day before I arrived. Havers, 1998. But before I could make sense of it, I heard something outside. Keys. I froze and slowly turned towards the door. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of metal sliding into metal. His keys entered the lock. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I shoved the phone into my pocket and bolted for the broken window. Glass bit into my palms as I hauled myself back out. The last thing I heard was the door creaking open behind me. I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could to the elementary school, and with a little courage left in the tank, I busted my second window of the night. Lucia told me most of the locals still clinging to Maywood Mills had gone to school with Nadine, that they'd all been in the same class. But I'd never heard of this boy, Lyle. Not once. The school itself was unsettling. Not because it was falling apart, though it was, but because of what filled it. Crayon drawings of Mr. Jangles lined the halls, taped to the walls, hanging on classroom doors, kids holding his hand, him dancing in the woods, him picking flowers by the creek. It almost felt like curriculum. Suddenly, the idea of a cult didn't seem far-fetched. It felt practical, organized, something taught young enough that no one thought to question it. Maybe this was it. I made my way to the teacher's lounge, though calling it a lounge was generous. It looked more like a college dorm that had been abandoned mid-semester. Burnt coffee hung in the air, unwashed dishes in the sink, one sad, stained microwave in the corner. In the back, I found a tall metal filing cabinet, and there they were. Thick, dust-covered yearbooks, the kind schools used before everything became digital. Nadine's murder happened late summer, which meant she'd still be listed in the 1998 edition. However, it wasn't there. It was gone. The closest book I could find was from 2000. I flipped through page after page. The photos were sun-faded and grainy, and most of the kids looked like they were terrified. Still, a pattern started to form. Lucy, Mickey, Horace, they were all there. All old classmates to Nadine, but Dale, he wasn't listed anywhere. Instead, there was a boy who looked just like him, Lyle Havers. The pieces clicked together with a dull, sinking weight. Dale was Lyle, but if that was the case, then why change his name? I worked myself backward through the books. Lyle wasn't in 97 or 96, but Nadine was. That meant he'd moved to town sometime between 98 and 99, probably 98 since Carla had flagged him as a person of interest. Was there a story here? New kid arrives, falls for the girl next door, gets rejected, heartbreaks, cue violent end? Maybe he'd been a suspect back then. I couldn't remember his name from the case files, but given how sloppy they were, that didn't mean much. Still, the question lingered. Why change his name? Because the evidence probably didn't stick. However, suspicion does. I'd seen it before. Changing your name doesn't erase the past, but it does bury it. Then something else surfaced. A memory from the missing files Horace had given me. One of the elderly couples. They were named the Havers, Ruth and Earl Havers. They vanished in 2003. I snapped a couple of photos of the pages, hands shaking slightly. Couldn't tell if it was cold or something closer to excitement. That's when I heard it. A faint clatter of metal, echoing down the hallway. I froze. Didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. How the hell did he know I was here? I slipped out of the lounge. If I remember correctly, the exit was on the other side of the hallway. The one lined with kids' drawings, because that's just what I needed. More of him. I moved through the corridor as quietly as I could. Then I felt it again. That strange pressure in the air, like the building itself was swallowing sound. I glanced out of a window. Silent lightning bloomed over the woods. No crack, no wind. I turned back toward the hallway and almost screamed. Down the far end of the corridor, illuminated only by moonlight, stood a figure. Tall, perfectly still. Mr. Jangles. Lightning flared again, carving his silhouette out of the dark. The top hat, the long coat, the wide, awful smile. With the next thunder boom, he started to dance. It wasn't ballet, like last night. This dance felt wrong. It was offbeat, childish, unpredictable, like someone mocking the very idea of what makes dancing beautiful. But I was spellbound. My blood turned to ice. Every scrap of anxiety I'd ever carried dumped into my veins at once. He was coming closer. I imagined this was what small fish felt like when they finally realized the beautiful light belonged to a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. His long, gaunt hand reached out for me. Lightning cracked outside again. This time I heard it, and the spell broke. I ran. Full sprint. Blind through the dark. My boots hammered against the old linoleum, loud as gunshots. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Anywhere else. I rounded a corner too fast, slipped, and fell on my broken arm. The snap echoed off the walls. I bit down hard, choking back a scream. Fumbled for my painkillers. Swallowed more than I should have. Dry. When the pain dulled enough for me to function, I forced my eyes open. I saw lockers. Tall, metal lockers lined the wall. I didn't think. I yanked one open, shoved myself inside, and pulled the door shut. The metal clicked softly. Then, silence fell. All I could hear was my own breathing. Through the narrow slats, I watched the hallway. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then a horrible sound filled the silence. Keys scraping against metal. He was dragging his keys against the lockers, one by one. I could hear him getting closer. I did my best not to move and held my breath. My sweat ran cold down my spine. My arm ached with pressure. Then he paused. Just a few feet away. Just like that. No sound. No final scare. And then he was gone. I didn't know what came over me. I should have stayed hidden. Slept in there until morning. But how do you explain that to a kid? A grown stranger passed out inside a school locker. No. I had enough trouble as it is. I ran back out of the school, into the night, and I didn't stop until I couldn't see the building anymore. As I was getting close to the bar, I fished Holly's number out of my pocket and called her. As soon as she answered, I blurted out some adrenaline-fueled theory. I can't remember exactly, but I think I said something about Dale or Lyle having killed Nadine that summer, how the kids must have covered for him, and as they got older, they got rid of anyone who sniffed out the truth, even his parents. Then they all blamed it on Mr. Jangles and created a lie that now everyone has accepted. It didn't really make sense, but I was desperate for answers. This was all I got. But why would the entire community get together to protect one disturbed kid? Wouldn't you just want to get rid of him? I couldn't think about it anymore as a strong smell hit me. Burning wood. I looked up and saw thick black smoke curling up into the sky, swallowing the treetops. The bar was on fire. By the time I got close enough to see through the smoke, it was already too late. Flames licked the walls and gutted the windows to my room. Glass exploded onto the street. The old neon sign took its last breath and flickered to death. I ducked behind a dumpster, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. And that's when I saw Lucy, sobbing, on her knees in the gravel, her arms streaked with soot. People from the town had gathered around. They didn't look scared. They looked furious. Their faces twisted with grief and firelight, and they were shouting my name. They were hunting me. I slowly backed away and ran down the street. There was only one place left to go, Holly's house. She took me in without a word. I must have looked worse than I felt, soaked to the bone, shaking, half from the cold, half from everything else I'd been through. She handed me a mug of hot coffee and told me to sit tight. Said she was going to take a quick shower, that I could rest in the basement if I wanted. Lock the door, if it made me feel safer. I nodded. Finally, I had time to think. What was next? Everything I owned was gone in the fire. All files, all my equipment, all my personal belongings. I was just about to head downstairs when I remembered. I had something. Nadine's diary. It was tucked into the inner pocket of my jacket. I pulled it out. It was damp around the edges, but intact. It was all I had left of her. I sat down and flipped through it. The first pages were what you'd expect from a teenage girl. Crushes, classes, doodles, fights with her mom, song lyrics, but then I hit something else. Pages and pages written between April and August 98. At first, it looked like a creative writing exercise. A story she made up for school. Something about a man in a tall hat who lives in the woods. Mr. Jangles. At first, he was harmless. A story Nadine made up for a class exercise. A monster that only existed on paper. But as the entries went on, her tone changed. She wrote about how the other kids became fascinated with him, obsessed. Lucy especially, and another girl, Anna Havers. Anna Havers? Lyle had a sister? I didn't recognize the name. I couldn't remember her from the school photo. Nadine explained that Lucy and Anna liked the idea of Mr. Jangles. So they started adding details, drawing him, talking about him like he was real. Like they could hear him. Then it stopped being a game. In the middle of summer, Nadine wrote that Lucy and Anna had convinced the others to hold small rituals. Meeting at the creek, praying, leaving offerings, talking to him at night. Nadine wanted it to stop. She said that she was scared, that she tried to tell the others that Mr. Jangles had left town, but they didn't believe her. And then I found the last entry she ever wrote. Lucy and Anna asked me to come with them tonight. My mom has told me not to hang out with Anna. She told me she's being homeschooled because she's special. Anna says he wants to see me, that I'm the only one who can do this right, because I know him and because he listens to me. The other children have decided to sneak out tonight too. Everyone will be there. They've already decided on the forest, the place by the creek. I tried to tell them he isn't real, that he never was. They accused me of lying, that I was just scared to admit the truth. Now they want to see him. He'll only come if I'm there. They say it's not dangerous, that nothing bad will happen. I don't want to go, but I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. If something happens to me, I want it to be known. I never believed in him. They did. Who was Anna Havers? Who came to Maywood Mills later and didn't keep her name? It dawned on me. I didn't want the answer. I tried to push it away, but it was already there. Waiting. Holly. That was the last clear thought I had before the sharp pain exploded at the back of my head and everything went black. I woke up here. At first I could hear them. Voices somewhere above me, muffled, angry, arguing maybe. Then the dirt, or not dirt. It must have been mud. Thick and wet and heavy. It slid over my casket like wet cement. I screamed, begging for them to stop, and then I heard it. The dam. Cracking like a gunshot in the distance. And then a sound like the sky tearing open. Rushing water, flooding everything, washing over my grave. I can only assume that's what I heard when I arrived 3 days ago. That they buried Carla. Her body was probably just a few feet away. Dale's too. He left me the note because he was ready to talk, to confess, ready to tear open the lie that had been holding this town together for decades. They couldn't let that happen. I don't know how deep down I am. I can't move. The walls are tight and pressing in on all sides. My ribs ache every time I try to breathe. Please, don't get any ideas. Don't come look for me. They'll find you. He'll find you. I'm writing this on my phone, which they forgot to take from me for some reason. So, if they somehow remember, I assume they'll come back for it, but I'll be long gone by then. So, if you hear an update from me again, please know that it won't be from me. They say small towns hold on to their stories longer than they should. And Mr. Jangles, his story will be safe with me. Forever. I've been stalking my ex-girlfriend. I have a good reason. Written by Hey Armageddon. I want to preface this by stating that I am not a good person, though I try to be. I've had a troubling past. Got mixed in with the wrong internet crowd and a lot of toxic ideologies. I began stalking when I was 16, after my first girlfriend left me for another guy, and I, in my pain, found myself reading about similar experiences in forums I shouldn't have been in, and got the idea of getting back at her from said internet spaces. As I grew up, I began agreeing more and more with some ideas about women that made me a pathetic and insecure man. I became severely attached to my partners, and I wanted to have total control. Always fearful they might be cheating on me or doing something else to try and hurt me. It didn't help that I was always rushing into relationships, always trying to avoid that sense of utter loneliness that came with being single, that came with partners who hurt me, partners I hurt, and some mutually assured destruction. My insecurity and distrust made me a somewhat skillful stalker, and I secretly spied on my partners however I could. I will not share the methods I used here, for that might invite others to try the same thing, which is not my objective. When I was 24, my stalking and hateful behavior almost got me in jail. I got a restraining order, was required to attend anger management classes, and therapy. It was the first time I had to face consequences for my abhorrent actions. And while I'll be the first one to admit that these consequences weren't as severe as some people might want for people like me, they ended up actually helping in setting me straight, My therapist was an older woman I'll call Miss Price. She helped me a lot in dealing with my issues, all the deep-seated hatred and insecurities I had. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be who I am today, 6 years later. She learned every bad thing I went through, every horrible thing I did, and showed me kindness and understanding I never thought I deserved. Over time, she became a sort of motherly figure for me. And although at 26, I made so much progress that my visits became more sporadic, I still kept in contact with her via email and social media. 3 years ago, I met Emma, a gorgeous girl with a bubbly personality and a heart of gold, always wearing muted greens and reds and sweaters and scarves, silky brown hair reaching down her back, and a pair of round glasses that completed that cozy look that immediately made me feel attracted to her. Feeling like I could do better now that I had overcome a lot of my issues, I struck up a conversation with her. Since our first interaction, I felt static in the air. She was such a fun person to talk to. Everything she said got my immediate interest. Despite my sudden approach, she was nonetheless friendly, and after an impromptu first date, we found ourselves following each other on social media and exchanging phone numbers. The instant attraction was mutual. That much was clear. We made plans to go out again the very next week. And over time, our dates became more frequent as we became more involved in each other's lives. Emma was a light fantasy writer and had a blog in which she posted short stories on. She was fairly popular and even had a novel in the works. When I first got to read her works, I was immediately transported into the worlds she portrayed with pen and paper. Truly, my new friend had clear talent, and that aspect made me fall for even more. Still, I made sure to take it slow. I wanted the both of us to get to know each other better before asking her to be my girlfriend. After 5 months, however, Emma was the one that confessed her love for me. I was so happy to hear that from her, but I knew I couldn't start a relationship with her without telling her about my past. So I did. I told her everything. The things I'd done, the things that were done to me. I tried to be as raw as possible, not to excuse my actions in any way, and to show I was trying to be a better man. And sweet, sweet Emma decided to give me a chance. She was truly an angel. And I promised myself that I'd be the best boyfriend I could for her. Our relationship developed a lot quicker after that. And while I often found myself thinking of checking her phone for anything suspicious while she left it unattended, or trying to look through the list of people she followed in her accounts, I always stopped myself before I could act on it. I tried my best to trust her, and I was always honest about having those thoughts with her. Sometimes she'd show me the people she was talking to all on her own, trying to ease my worries when I was struggling the most. Emma cared deeply about me and wanted me to get better. Her openness was so refreshing, and it was something I had never experienced before. Her support meant the most to me, and over time, I found myself able to feel at ease while being with her. There were still times I felt a worry or a need to do something stalker-ish, but it became a lot easier to manage, as I had no real reason to doubt Emma in the slightest. In my happiest moments, I considered both Emma and Miss Price to be my saviors. Everything changed about 1.5 years into our relationship. Emma was an only child, and still very involved in her parents' lives, despite living on her own and being only a year younger than me. I couldn't say the same about me. My parents hated me for becoming such an awful person, and they were unwilling to give me a second chance. I understood where they were coming from, but that didn't make it hurt any less. It was wintertime, and Emma's parents invited us to a trip in the mountains. By that point, we had been acquainted for a while, and thanks to their kindness, no doubt where Emma got that from, I felt like I had a family again. Tragically, I was unable to go, as my work kept me especially busy on the days leading up to Christmas Day. Sometimes I wish I'd gone. Maybe things would have gone differently then. The day before New Year's Eve, a man called me on the phone, claiming to be a man named Hank, one of Emma's uncles. He said I was listed as Emma's emergency contact and told me the bad news. Emma and her parents had gotten into an accident. Apparently, a bear managed to get into their cabin and things got ugly. The bear killed both her parents, and while Emma herself ended up mostly unharmed, save for a few minor injuries, the experience severely traumatized her. Damn. Unfortunate to come across a bear during wintertime, he said solemnly. I couldn't put it any better. And that very same day, I found myself rushing to the hospital Emma was in. The woman that laid on the hospital bed was almost unrecognizable. She had white bandages wrapped around her left arm and upper thigh, some splotches of dried blood clearly shown in various spots. Truly, the injuries didn't seem that bad, but her expression, it was an expression I had never seen in her face. Neither anger nor sorrow, rather complete emptiness. A nurse told me that she was still in an emotional shock, and that it might take weeks or even months for her to recover. As I tried talking to her, she replied to me in a dry, monotone tone. Her eyes looked dead, as if there was nothing left for the woman I loved. Later, I found out she had incurred memory loss. Weeks passed, and I had her move in with me so I could take care of her. It was an uncomfortable time, but I genuinely wanted to take care of her and help her recover. She became clumsy, and she had forgotten even the most basic of things. I had to teach her things like how to eat properly and how to cook. She was relearning many things, including some she taught me herself in the past, and most of her friends and family were severely worried for her well-being. I sought the aid of specialists in the medical field and was told it was most likely due to high stress or perhaps some head injury we didn't know about. After getting some studies done, we were told they could find no such injury. At least her ability to relearn these skills wasn't impeded in the slightest, and it seemed as if her mind was as sharp as ever. It was a tough time, and with memory loss, I was also forced to manage her social media and keep note of her passwords while she readjusted. This gave me a lot of unwanted power over all of her messages and information, but I felt proud for being able to fight those urges with relative ease. 6 months later, things came back to a somewhat normal state. Emma learned things quickly and seemed to become more efficient at doing everything than before. That also came with a shift in personality, however. Her bubbly and kind demeanor changed to a more serious and uncaring attitude. It was as if she had become a completely different person, as if my Emma wasn't there anymore. At first, she wouldn't even hug me, and I didn't want to try any kind of intimacy, knowing she didn't remember her feelings for me. We didn't even sleep together. I just let her sleep in my bed while I slept on the couch. As she began getting better and questioned what our relationship was, I told her that she could decide that once she processed her feelings for me. As much as it hurt, I didn't want her to feel forced to be with me if she didn't feel love anymore. Soon after, she started demonstrating affection in weird ways. She would bite me, over time with greater intensity, and lick my arms or neck, all the while still unwilling to hug me often or even kiss. After that, I would wake up in the middle of the night and find her standing next to me, staring. Often I'd shriek in horror at the sudden sight of a dark figure in front of me, but as it became a common occurrence, I got used to it. Every time I asked her what she was doing, she told me she couldn't sleep that night, and that watching me sleep helped her sleep as well. I began growing increasingly worried, but as she had never once hurt me while I slept, I tried to bear with it as best as I could. To make things simple, I had her use one of my emails so she could learn how to use my computer at the start, since her laptop got destroyed in the attack. After she'd readjusted, it became a habit for her to keep using that email while using my PC. even though her phone had her normal email in it. She didn't seem to find any reason to switch emails or even manage multiple accounts anymore. She was comfortable simply using what was on each device by default. A few months ago, while using my computer alone, I decided to check my browser history to look for a website I was visiting the day prior and had forgotten the name of. Naturally, the searches there were a mix of mine and hers, so I didn't bat an eye when I saw random video searches I didn't look for, or the odd site here and there. That was until a specific search caught my eye. Jobs that work with fresh corpses. This was quite off-putting, but I tried to rationalize that maybe she was writing again and needed some inspiration. After all, her memory loss also came with changes to her interests, and while she no longer was into writing, she developed a taste for horror that could be leading into, perhaps, writing stories of a different genre. The odd search got me curious, and I began to look further down the search history. I could find a lot of true crime, urban legends, and close encounters with monsters. I also noticed that every few weeks, she would look for reports on the incident that killed her parents, often looking at the original publications and the few updates made throughout the initial months. Although she didn't seem to remember it, she appeared to have gained some sort of morbid curiosity for the subject. As I scrolled back closer to Christmas, closer to the time I began teaching her how to use my computer, I found more crude search results, such as human rituals, how to show emotions, how to live with others, common roadkill sites, looked for specifically with the name of our town in the search, and is it socially acceptable to eat another human? I had a deeply unsettling feeling, but I couldn't come to any conclusion yet. From then on, I began observing Emma more closely, and at the same time, she began getting more involved in doing housework. While she would refuse to cook, she'd always watch me prepare meals for the both of us. On one occasion, I cut my finger while chopping some vegetables, and before I could react, Emma had it in her mouth sucking the blood out. She said she just wanted to help, but I decided to be more careful after that odd display. When she looked at me, I noticed how her calm demeanor hid something behind it. Something I couldn't understand at that point yet still made me feel uncomfortable. I decided to set up a hidden camera with night vision in my living room, pointed at the couch where I slept. I checked the footage recorded at night on a phone app that came with the camera, and noticed her nightly visits continued. Now, if not from the start, they were happening every single night. Over time, I installed more hidden cameras around the house over time, making sure they weren't many to reduce the chance of her finding them. After watching the footage, I noticed that she had a habit of always standing in front of the window, peeking through the blinds and looking at me as I drove off. Then she'd walk to my computer or sit down and simply look at videos or read things all day long. That blank, unchanging expression she used to have, coming back and only leaving once I was back or when she had to leave the house. Originally, she didn't leave the house that much, but as she became more comfortable being alone, she gradually made a habit of getting groceries on her own while I was at work, messaging me to ask if I wanted anything. Knowing what I knew, this started to look suspicious as well. So one day, I decided to follow her to clear my doubts. That day, I took the day off and lied to her, telling her I was heading to work. The day before, I placed a tracker in her car I bought a few days earlier. And that morning, I sneaked out a change of clothes and a pair of binoculars in my suitcase, then drove my own car to a parking lot near a car rental place to rent one for the day. After that, I switched clothes, checked the tracker on the app, and began following her around. I felt guilty about returning to my old ways and disappointing Miss Price, but I told myself this time wasn't out of jealousy or insecurity. Rather, it was due to fear for my safety. She did what any normal person would do: visit the mall and a few smaller stores. The thing that scared me the most was what I found she did after. I followed Emma back home, making sure to keep my distance, and parked the car a few streets away, far enough to be unnoticed and close enough to use my binoculars. After she parked and carried the groceries inside, I looked at my phone and accessed the camera's app to look at her in real time. She took everything out of the bags and put everything in its respective place, but left a block of raw meat, I think it was beef, out on the counter. Next, she got a mop and a bucket, took off all of her clothes, threw them on a nearby couch, grabbed a chunk of meat and began eating it. My jaw hit the bottom of the car as I looked at my now ex-girlfriend eating raw meat with nothing on, the fresh blood dripping down her mouth and onto her chest and abdomen in a way that reminded me of some sort of satanic ritual or the like. I felt sick to my stomach, unsure if this was some sort of mental illness or something else. And the somewhat low quality of the chewing noises and her grunts simply added to the bizarre experience. Then, as I recovered from the shock and tried to make sense of what I was seeing and hearing, I recalled her search history and her strange fascination with the attack that killed her parents. I believe in the paranormal, but had never experienced anything myself, and I was wondering if what attacked Emma and her parents that day wasn't a bear, but something else. If maybe, just maybe, my beloved girlfriend had fallen victim to the monster as well, and it had come back pretending to be her. Looking back at the video feed, she kept eating the entire chunk of meat, probably about 4 pounds, though I couldn't really tell from the video alone, until it was completely gone. It was an insane amount of meat that no human should eat in a single day, let alone in a single meal. After that, she mopped down the floor, cleaned herself with a few napkins, brought them to the bathroom, and flushed them down the toilet. Lastly, she went to take a shower. All the evidence of her feast gone, were it not for me having a recording of it. As far as I could tell, this was the first time she did something like that in the house. No other recordings showed her doing anything like that in the past. That night, I came home still pretending to have worked. Fortunately, she didn't ask about it, and we spent the night peacefully. Just in case, I put the phone in my pajama pants, grabbed the kitchen knife, and slid it under my pillow before going to bed. I was twisting and turning, unable to sleep in the slightest. Suddenly, I heard the door of my room open, and I pretended to be asleep as Emma walked towards me and stood right in front of the couch. I half opened my eyes and saw the woman I used to love, her face perfectly illuminated by moonlight, mine obscured by penumbra. From that night, I was unable to understand the look in her eyes. That look that had sent shivers down my spine multiple times, even though I didn't know why. It was hunger, a ravenous, primal hunger. I was her prey. I couldn't move. My breathing started to get heavy, and I had to do my best to keep it under control. I pretended to be asleep while that thing kept looking at me. It felt like I was stuck in that uncomfortable space for hours, but whatever the actual time was, she left after a while. When I felt the danger had passed, I was finally able to fall asleep, and did so almost immediately. I woke up again with a sudden jolt of pain, and found Emma, or the thing masquerading as her, kneeling down and biting down on my left arm. I tried pulling away, and she bit down a chunk of skin without mercy. "What is wrong with you?" I asked, the adrenaline quickly rushing through my body as I went on high alert and pushed her away. grabbing the knife with my right hand and pointing it at her while trying to step back. Her words came out so desperate, her voice almost guttural and uncanny. "I'm sorry, it's just your fear. It makes me even hungrier." I leaped back onto the couch and put my free hand in the backseat to try and flip around. But the weight I put all of the sudden made the couch fall backwards, and I stumbled sideways onto the floor behind, falling on my left side while the knife flew off my hand and landed nearby, in between me and the front door. I looked back and Emma, leaping at me like an animal, landing next to my left leg and biting into my calf, even through the thick fabric of the pants I was wearing. I felt her teeth sinking into my skin like sharp needles, and while trying to kick at her with my other leg in an awkward way, I used my healthy hand to try and reach the knife. Her mouth wouldn't leave my calf, and it wasn't until she managed to rip yet another chunk of my flesh that she finally let me go. A hole in my pants with blood soaking into the fabric was the only indication that it was my only chance to leave, as it was clear I couldn't fight this thing. I crawled pathetically towards the knife and picked it up, then leaned against the wall next to the front door to unlock it while the creature, now almost completely feral, struggled trying to split out the cloth stuck in its teeth. The next part was a blur. I recall opening the door and crawling out before closing it behind me. I think the adrenaline coursing through my veins was working overtime, because next thing I knew, I was running out the street in the middle of the night while the thing chased behind me. I don't know how long that went for, but I'm sure that, had I not closed the door while I was distracted, it would have caught up to me before I was saved. I didn't know how this happened, as I lost consciousness when help arrived. I woke up a few days later, finding myself with bandages not only on my calf and wrist, but also on my stomach. I was told by one of the doctors that the damage I had incurred required surgery, and that there were 2 officers waiting for me to wake up to take my statement. I told them what had happened, and fortunately, my phone survived the ordeal with just a few cracks on the screen. I showed them some of what I had gathered, leaving out any of my paranormal theories, and told them she began acting crazier and crazier since the accident with her parents. After explaining everything, I found out what happened after I fell unconscious. A truck with some college guys coming back from a party stumbled across Emma in the middle of the road, digging her teeth into the side of my gut while I was unconscious. They said that the car's headlights startled her, and at the moment they noticed what she was doing, they figured she was some sort of junkie and tried to scare her away. Fortunately, they had weapons on them, so after a few warning shots, the thing scurried away into the nearby woods. The guys called the police and an ambulance for me, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. That was 2 months ago. Since then, the government officials came to my home and confiscated my cameras and electronics. I didn't fight them on it, though I was upset I wouldn't be allowed to have any video evidence of what had happened. I was told there should be no further issues, but that I should change the locks and get a weapon, just in case. The story that was given to the press was that Emma had suffered a mental breakdown and attacked me, but ran off before police could get to where the guys found me and hadn't been found since. 9 people have gone missing in that time span. The first 5 were homeless, and sadly, that meant the police didn't put too much effort in the investigation. 2 weeks ago, a cargo worker, a nurse, and a teacher went missing as well. This caused a larger stir in the public, and I hoped it was just a coincidence. But something told me that it might be involved. Yesterday, I found that there was a new victim in the news. It was Miss Price, whom I returned to for therapy after I recovered enough from surgery. Now I find myself alone again, scared of something that might come and try to finish the job. I wonder if this is a punishment for all the wrongs I did in the past. If I got a taste of a perfect life just to be taken away by a force of nature. Or perhaps something more malevolent. If someone you love gets in a terrible accident where they're the only survivor, and they seem to become a different person after that, be careful. They might not be your loved one anymore. There's something very wrong about the woman under the bridge. Written by Twisted Urban Tales. When I moved to Philly for work, I knew the area wasn't great. Not run down enough to scare me off as a 6'2" guy who used to work security, but not the kind of place you wander around at night alone either, whoever you were. My walk to work took me under a bridge every morning, and that's where I first saw her. She sat on a flattened piece of cardboard near one of the pillars, head lowered, hood pulled up, a "please spare change for food" sign scrawled in pencil was propped up beside her. At first, I didn't think much of it until I looked again. She had no legs. Not covered or hidden, just no legs. There were stumps above where her knees should have been. I paused and took a closer look. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s, and that part stuck with me more than anything. Her face was grimy, and she had mangled, unkempt blonde hair. But I could tell. You expect to see older people out there, but not someone who still looked like they should have been in college. I reached into my wallet and dropped a few bills into the cup beside her. She didn't speak. She just lowered her head slightly. Everyone else walked past. The next time I saw her was the morning after the weekend, in the same spot, sitting in the same position. This time, when I gave her money, she looked up at me. Her eyes were wide with something that looked like panicked desperation. I hesitated. "You okay?" I asked. No response. I assumed she was pleading for more cash, so that's what I gave her. But that wide-eyed look still persisted as I slowly walked away. Later that day, I got off work early and passed her again around midday. And this time she was looking down, as if trying to be invisible. It stuck with me for a while. The next morning when I stopped again, she did something different. As I handed her money, she slipped something into my hand. A small folded piece of paper, gray and worn, like it had been through it. I opened it while walking. The writing was in messy pencil scribbles, and it wasn't English. I looked over it curiously and put it in my back pocket, assuming it was a thank you note or something. During my work break, I pulled out the note again and glanced at it curiously, wondering what it said. An idea occurred to me. I downloaded a translation app and took a photo. Then I uploaded it to the app, which detected the language: Russian. A few seconds later, the English translation came back. "Do not give me money. Man is watching from other side. He see where you keep wallet. He wait for you when you alone. He make me do this." I blinked and read it again. A cold chill ran through me. I didn't take that route home, and when I got back, I called the police. Told them everything. The woman, the note, the warning. The voice on the other end barely reacted, sounding like it was just another Tuesday. Just said that they'd get someone to check it out. Didn't ask for the note or any further details. No follow-up questions, no urgency, nothing. I hung up with no real optimism that they'd take any action. 2 days later, I went back early in the morning, just to check if anything had changed. The streets were still dark, completely empty at that hour. I had a fake wallet in my back pocket and my pistol just in case, but I wasn't expecting to use it. I arrived hoping to see the area cornered off, at least some sign that the authorities had been there, but there was none at all. And she wasn't there. The spot under the bridge was empty. The cardboard and the sign were gone. I glanced at my watch and stood there, telling myself it was early. She might not be out yet. But where else would she be? After all, she slept there. I stood there longer than I should have, listening. The water beneath the bridge moved slowly, quietly. Then I heard something. Faint, like a voice. I turned my head in its direction, then followed it cautiously down toward the riverbank. As I walked, the ground became uneven, damp. I paused a few more times, listening closely, but I didn't hear the sound again. I almost turned around and left. But then I saw a dark shape out in the distance shift. It didn't look right. I took a few more steps towards it, and that's when I saw what it was. Someone was in the water. I rushed closer, and that's when I saw her, turning in the current as it washed over her face. I opened my phone torch and pointed it at her. It was the same homeless girl from under the bridge. She was tied up and barely moving. I waded in without thinking. The water soaked through my shoes instantly as I grabbed her and slipped my arm under her shoulder. I lifted her out of the water. She was slippery and cold. There was blood on her arms and down the front of her shirt. Her eyes flickered open as I pulled her out, dragging her onto the bank. Then her eyes widened and her hand grabbed my shirt, weakly but urgently. I realized she was looking behind me. Then footsteps. I reacted before I could even think. I didn't even stop to look. I just pulled out my gun, turned, and fired. The sound was deafening, cutting through the silence. Something hit the ground in the distance before I fully saw it. My heart racing, I swallowed and approached closer, both hands on the gun. A tall man lay twitching on the damp ground. I pointed my phone torch at him. He was dressed in black, mask over his face, gun in his hand. If she hadn't warned me, I would have been dead. As I looked into his eyes, the realization dawned on me. This was him, the one using her, making her sit there, day after day, pulling people in. When she looked at me like that, she hadn't been begging. She'd been trying to warn me, and he must have found out about the note. I felt sick. Rage flooded in so fast it drowned everything else. I aimed at his head and fired. He stopped moving instantly, but I fired again and again. I lost count. Each shot was louder than the last, splitting through the silence in the dark. I kept firing after it stopped being self-defense. Consequences be damned. It took me a few seconds to catch my breath after the last shot. Then I rushed back towards the water. By the time I got back to her, she wasn't responsive. I dropped to my knees beside her and lifted her. "Hey, stay with me," I said, my voice breaking. "You're okay. You'll be okay." There was no reaction. I pressed my fingers to her neck, feeling for anything. "Come on," I muttered under my breath. I pulled out my phone and called an ambulance, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. Every second felt stretched thin. "It's okay," I told her. "You're safe now." But I didn't know if she could even hear me. And as I said it, I could feel a sinking feeling in my chest. The paramedics tried. They worked on her right there by the water. As I stood back watching them, but it didn't take long. She was pronounced dead on arrival. I still walk that route sometimes. Not because I have to, but because I can't stop thinking about it. I feel eyes on me every time I go back to that place under the bridge. Half the time I expect someone to step out of the shadows and come at me. I'm always ready for it now. I walk through it slowly, tense, waiting, listening for the smallest sound, but nothing ever since. People walk through it like nothing ever happened, just like every other part of the city. Most people never even noticed her. But now, Some of them noticed the flowers I left where she used to sit. You Know How to Spot a Kind of Thing? Written by Saturday. A long time ago, someone asked me a strange question. It was my last year of high school. I was drunk out of my mind and crashing at a friend's place. We were coming down from an after party and half of us didn't want to go home. Two guys were sleeping on the floor. One was nodding on and off at a lazy boy in the corner, still gripping a 40. I was on the couch with a curly-haired girl, talking about nothing. You know how to spot a kind of thing? What kind of thing? No, she said, lazily shaking her head. Not a kind of thing, a kind of thing. You're not making any sense. She poked me in the chest and put her head on my shoulder, falling half asleep as she explained. It's a game. It teaches you to think about stuff. All right, what is it? You sure you want to know? I mean, now I have to. I was barely paying attention. My hands smelled like cheese snacks and rubber. We'd been playing ping pong, and the rackets were kind of cheap. Think of a place you spend a lot of time in, like several times a week, but not all the time. Not like your bedroom. I don't spend all my time in my bedroom. Come on, you got a place in mind? I thought about this alleyway between my family home and my neighbor. It was this fenced-off alley, not big enough to drive a car through. I went there every day on my way to class. I nodded. I got one. Now think of something in that place. Something you know, but don't own. Something you've seen, but got no pictures of. Give me a sec. I thought about this one particular thing. It was a little teddy bear keychain that someone had put on one of the fence posts. Nothing big, just a plastic thing with a heart in the middle of the chest and an all too neutral teddy bear smile. Just a fun little quirk on an otherwise depressing stretch of concrete. All right, I got a thing. You know what colors it is? She asked. I had an idea, but I wasn't 100% certain. There was some red in there. I knew that much, a bit of yellow, but I couldn't say exactly what was what. Maybe the nose was black? Kinda, I said. She looked up at me and poked me in the chest again. That's a kind of thing, she muttered. They're pretty cool. She sat up and stretched a little, kicking over an empty can. The guy with the 40 had fully admitted defeat and curled up into a ball. They exist on the edge of things, she explained. It could be blue, it could be yellow, it could change into red. There's no way to really know. It only exists in your memory. But it's red. How can you know for sure? Like, for sure? I can check it. What if it wasn't red yesterday? Do you know for sure what it was yesterday? I mean, things don't change color. Kind of things do. You're making this sound like a ghost story. Who says it isn't? We got into this weird wine-fueled philosophy nonsense that led us nowhere and ended up making out on the patio, staying up until dawn. As the sun rose and a car came to take her away, I decided to drag myself home. As I wandered, I took the route through that alley, and like always, the teddy bear keychain hung on one of the posts. Except the thing wasn't red or yellow. It was blue, like my mother's novelty sunflowers. There were a couple of red spots along the paws, but the main thing was all blue. I'd been certain it was supposed to be all red, but maybe I just focused on the details. I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and instantly forgot about it. I wouldn't see that keychain for a long time, and I wouldn't think much of it because I guess that's the nature of kind of things. I saw that keychain a couple of times over the next few years. When I moved into my college dorm, I had it resting on my windowsill. I think my mom put it there. At some point, I knocked it over and it rolled under a nightstand, where I didn't find it until years later when I graduated. From there, it ended up in a box of knickknacks, which ended up on a shelf in my apartment. It wasn't an exciting journey, but it was my journey. You sort of forget how long things stick around until you're old enough to look back on it. I got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and got working on a doctorate. As part of my doctorate, I had to teach a class. My expertise circled around information science, with a slight leaning towards digital architecture and preservation. But I wanted to give my classes something to make them really stick. That was the first time in years that I thought of kind of things. Problem was, once I went looking for that teddy bear keychain to bring to class, I couldn't find it. When I held my first class, I told them all about the kind of things. I asked my students to consider what their own kind of things would be. It was all framed in the context of how important it is to preserve factual information in a way that makes it contextually aware. But for all the first-year students, it turned into a thing to share at parties. And the circle of drunk philosophers continued for another generation. It was fun though. They all had something. A cracked coffee cup, an old bike wheel abandoned near the football field, a baseball cap on the top shelf that they couldn't reach. All little things that didn't matter but were important enough to be made and forgotten about. And now I had a whole class thinking about them. Every class I taught heard that story. I skipped the part where I made out and smelled of Fritos. They didn't need the details. Not everyone knew my name, but they all remembered me asking that first question on the first day of class. You know how to spot a kind of thing? By the time I turned 27, I finished my doctorate. I had a paid position, but I was looking for something more permanent. You don't go chasing tenure right away, but I wanted to do more experimental work, maybe field work even. I had applied for a couple positions at colleges out of state. Not Ivy League, but up there in the charts. I figured this was as good as a time as any to stretch my wings after spending all of my life in one state and city. One of my proposals got picked up, and my time as a teacher of that one class was swiftly coming to an end. One more semester and that would be it. It was bittersweet. I'd gotten to know my colleagues pretty well. They were a bunch of fun nerds, having board games, nights in the lounge. They all had this thing where they used cleaned out vodka bottles as water bottles just so students could take funny pictures and go, "This is my professor, LOL." I was sad to see it come to an end, but it was time to move on to find newer things. New can't always be bad, and my colleagues had planned one hell of a going away party. It was the last day of class, a Friday. They were holding a bit of an event for my last class, and all my colleagues were there. Some held speeches, and the students were invited to share some anecdotes as well. There were a lot of nice words, I won't lie. I got a bit teary-eyed. Once things come to an end, everything gets put into the perspective of how much you're going to miss it. Every stupid little detail. As a final hurrah, they revealed a gift to me. Something for me to bring to my next office. I could tell it was a box of some kind, covered in a big white cloth. They pulled it off with a magician's flair. We all applauded. There was a box. That much was right. A big one. At first, it looked like a junk drawer. A rock with googly eyes, an old horseshoe, a tasteless bronze leprechaun, things like that. But once I saw the text printed on the side, it all made sense. Kind of things. "We decided to get them for you," a colleague said, leaning on my arm. "We know how much you love them, so we all went out and got our kind of things. We figured you'd enjoy them." I've never been so proud to get a box of junk. The next few weeks were a blur. Moving trucks, cleaning, leases, putting those plastic buttons on the legs of a new furniture so they don't scrape the floor, putting up shelves, straightening photos and paintings, washing the cloth for the kitchen table, making a space into a home, one tacky bachelor item at a time. All the while, I had a box resting on top of my closet, still proudly labeled "Kinda Things." I got an apartment with 3 rooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen. I hadn't planned on living that large, but it was too cheap for me to pass up. I made one room into my bedroom and the other my living room, but I wasn't so sure about the third one. I decided I'd make it into a guest room, somewhere down the line. For now, it was a storage space, somewhere for me to put boxes of memories that didn't quite matter. Not just the kind of things, but the baseball cards, the participation trophies, and the signed band shirts. It was all in there. I think most people have a space like that, in one way or another. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. I was settling into a new job with new people in a new town. I was learning what places made the best tofu dishes. There was no time to reminisce. I had to look forward. If you don't, things in the rear view look bigger than they really are. On my first day of class, I brought the box of Kinda Things. I barely looked at it. I was too busy trying to keep the notes in my head organized. I couldn't half-ass my first day on the job. I had to make an impression. Not just for my students, but there'd be a couple of new colleagues in the crowd. That's why I brought the box. Crowds love props. I shook hands with those who attended, introduced myself, and got a moderate crowd of about 40 people for my first day. Not just a class, but a couple of extras. I asked them all to sit up front as I unveiled the box. I had it turned outward towards the students. I barely saw the thing myself. No photos, I emphasized, shushing them with a finger like I was telling a secret. No pictures and no ownership. You can keep them, but they're never really yours. That got a couple of chuckles. I had a presentation ready and had them name a couple of kind of things in their own lives as I slowly pivoted into a metaphor related to my field of study. It was pretty clean. I'd used that particular setup a couple of times before. And yet, there was something about that one class that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't just being nervous about a new job. It was something about the crowd. Every time I looked back, my eyes got stuck on something. Like how you react to sudden movement, but with nothing changing. Something was putting me on edge, and I couldn't point my finger at what it was. Coming back home after a long day, I put down my box of Kind of Things in the hallway and got myself a cold beer. I wasn't going anywhere, and I'd spent all my social energy in one go. There'd been muffins in the lounge, and everyone wanted to talk to me about my various articles and, of course, the kind of things. Everyone always wants to tell me about their kind of thing. I walked into my budding guest room with its mint green walls. I put down my beer and tossed the box back up on the closet. As I did, something tumbled out. My teddy bear keychain. It landed on the floor with a little rattle. I stood there for a moment, dumbfounded. It couldn't have been in the box. I would have seen it. Or maybe I put it there during the move and forgot about it. Strange. I hadn't seen it for a long time. I picked it up and rolled it between my fingers. Looking at the colors and shapes, it wasn't like how I remembered it. It wasn't all blue like I thought it was. It was mostly gray with details of blue and red. The eyes looked like lemons. The heart in the center of its chest was a little smaller than I remembered. I decided to take the box back down to check if there was anything else I'd accidentally put in there that I'd forgotten about. I sat down on the floor, took another sip of beer, and opened the box. For a moment, my mind short-circuited. I had never seen any of those things before. There was an old-timey alarm clock with a broken spring, what looked like a watermelon paperweight, and a handheld dinner bell without the ringer thing in the middle. I hadn't seen any of those items before, and I was more than certain that I'd gone through that box at least once or twice. But then, why couldn't I remember those things and who gave them to me? I sat there, trying to think of the names of the students who'd been there. I remembered them fairly well, but I couldn't point to who gave me what. That and little details about them had faded. Was it Josh or Joshua? Did one of them have an NHL or NBA cap? I could sort of remember the outline, but not the absolute details. It gave me a moment to pause. I considered that there might be such a thing as kind of people. Those people you spend a little time with every now and then, but never really get to know. Peripheral people. Pseudo people. If that's the case, who's to say I wasn't someone's kind of people? I mean, I had to be, right? I shook the thought out of my mind, finished my beer, and got up off the floor. I headed for the door, closed my hand around the handle and pulled. Nothing happened. Had it always been opened outward? Of course it had. It was just a new apartment, and I was getting accustomed to it. And yet, I'm not the one for being paranoid. Through all my years of talking about kind of things, I always considered them a fun thought experiment. Some talked about them like demons or ghost stories, like they were supposed to bring something horrible. I never saw it like that. They were just this idea to consider about the nature of permanence. They weren't malicious things. And yet, I started to get this uncomfortable sensation in my stomach whenever I passed by my guest room. It wasn't a conscious thought, but just this sense of unease, like there would be something new for me to misremember if I entered that room, with that box, and didn't pay attention. I tried to remember exactly what I'd seen in that box, and what color they were, but without going in there to check, there was no way to know for sure. That just made it worse. I finally decided that I was just going to indulge my superstition, just to demystify the whole thing. One weekend, I got my phone, a notepad, and decided I was going to write down and photograph everything in that box. After that, I would never have to think about it again. It could even be a fun thing to try against my students. Maybe I could ask them to remember as many things as possible from the box and cross-check it at the end of the semester to see how many points they score. I'd brought a small coffee table and a chair from the kitchen. I pulled the curtains open, letting in some moonlight. It was late May and nights were growing shorter. Perfect for someone who'd run out of steam grading assignments all Friday. I took down the box from the top of the closet and noticed the teddy bear keychain. Nothing strange about it, other than it being a box. It must have been in there when I put the box back up. No point in getting antsy at the first item. Then again, the eyes looked more mango than lemon. How could I have been so certain about the lemon color? Maybe the moonlight made it look different. I brought out one item after another, only stopping briefly to think about who gave it to me. I remembered quite a lot of them. I could pretty clearly tell which one of them was from my colleagues and which weren't. A couple of items were probably just random debris that one picked up just to be in on the joke. However, I suspected that quite a few things were probably authentic kindas. I went through the items one by one, taking pictures and writing their features down in a notebook. It was a strange feeling, sitting alone with so many uncertainties. About 36 thought experiments, all neatly lined up and cataloged. The final item I wrote down was a little ceramic frog in a tux, smoking a cigar. There were some folks outside making a ruckus, so I got up to close the guest room door. I paused for a moment to consider which way the door went. It opened outward. Sitting back down, I took a closer look at the ceramic frog knick-knack. It wasn't smoking a cigar. It was more like a cigarette. A long, lean one. It wasn't a big detail, but it was enough to make me doubt myself. What if I had cataloged something else wrong? Just a teeny tiny bit wrong. That would put the whole thing into question. I had to be certain. I went back along the line of items, double checking. I made a few corrections. The alarm clock was stuck on 1:30, not 1:25. The broken spring went around 6 times with a twirl at the end, not 7 times with a straight end. And finally, I was back to my teddy bear keychain. I wrote down the details as I remembered them. Scratching my head, I got up. I needed a break anyway. I went back to the guest room door and tugged on the handle. It was supposed to open outward, but it didn't. I pulled it inward instead. That didn't work either. I took a step back, feeling a stone sink into my chest. I could hear my own breathing as the room felt smaller. I put my hand on the handle again and took a deep breath. I'd opened this door before. I knew it would open again. I turned the handle and pushed. It swung outward. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then again, why was I relieved? What was I expecting? There was no world in which that door wouldn't open. So what was the big deal? I decided I wouldn't let myself be tricked by uncertainty. I closed the door and opened it again. Then I did it again. Then I did it a third time, but with a little celebratory swirl. As I came around, I noticed something on the coffee table. The frog was definitely smoking a cigar. I stopped mid-twirl and looked a little closer. That wasn't right. I'd written cigar, crossed it out, written cigarette, and now it was certainly a cigar again. I picked it up and held it up to the light. Definitely a cigar. No doubt about it. In every conceivable angle. I tried to get a reference point, like how the cigar was as thick as its froggy fingers. A cigarette wouldn't be like that. That was something I could rely on. A measurement, not a casual observation. I put it down and stepped back, looking at the table as a whole. Without perceiving every single item individually, there were things I didn't recognize. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but I knew something looked different. Or maybe not even looked. It felt different. For the first time, I considered that maybe kind of things weren't just a thought experiment. Maybe there really was something to them. Maybe the items at the fringe of our lives do possess some quality that we don't perceive until we sit down and look. And if that was the case, what might happen if you put 36 of them in a single room and close the door? Hold on. I didn't close the door. It was open last time I checked. I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. I was spiraling for no reason, working myself up over nothing, like staring at a still picture, thinking there's a ghost in it. There weren't creepy ghosts or creepy crawlies. They were just little things left by the roadside, figuratively and literally. I picked up the first thing I spotted and held it up, a little glass snail. It lost one of its eye stalks. I looked to my reference sheet to confirm which eye it was, only to realize the snail wasn't on the sheet to begin with. Had I missed it? At that point, I stopped. I flicked the snail across the room, grasped my head, and said no out loud. I needed to hear the word to ground myself. I was making things up. I had to be. I decided to call it a night, leaving it all on the table for now. I shook my head and turned to the window, grasping for the curtains as I checked my phone. It was getting close to 11 p.m. There were no curtains. Looking up, I realized I was standing at the wrong end of the room. The window was to the right, and there were no curtains. I had been so certain just a second ago, but my hand just tapped against the eggshell wallpaper. I was getting confused. Turning back around, I noticed two things. One, that the door was slightly more to the right than I thought it would be, and that the coffee table was up against the leftmost wall. It's like I'd turned the wrong way. My eyes briefly crossed over, and I saw double. I shook my head again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I tried telling myself it was conditioning. I had been thinking about uncertainty all day, and I was tricking myself into a pattern of thought. I headed for the door, turned the handle, and pushed outward. Again, nothing. This didn't make sense. I knew it opened outward, and I refused to believe otherwise. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, and I had to accept that this was not normal. Over the next few minutes, it felt like everything changed every time I looked away. The window felt smaller, the door had the handle on the wrong side, the coffee table was up against the leftmost wall, then the right, the wallpaper was eggshell, then got a slight hint of maroon. The floor was imitation wood, then a textureless brown plastic. I pulled on the door a couple of times, but it didn't open either. I turned to open the window, but it was gone. I could feel a cold sweat coming on. I wasn't imagining this. It wasn't a misunderstanding. I knew what was out there, and I knew I'd looked out that window dozens of times. I backed away and put my hand on the light switch. I flicked it off and on again. A couple of things changed. A few items seemed to have moved. One of the closet doors was open. I flicked the light again, faster this time. The table was slightly angled. The window was still gone. I reached for the light switch again, but it was higher up than before. I flicked it off and back on again, but the light did not come back on. I fumbled around in the dark. I could feel myself stepping on things that weren't supposed to be there. I stubbed my toe against the coffee table in the middle of the room. I fumbled with my hands along 4 walls of the room, but I couldn't find the door. I couldn't find the closet. After a while, I couldn't even find the coffee table. I tried lying down flat and spreading out my arms, hoping to touch pretty much whatever. After a couple of tries, I couldn't even find my way back to the wall. It was just me and this impressionless void. It didn't make sense to me. I knew exactly where things were supposed to be. I knew what I was supposed to be looking at, but that didn't matter. I brought out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I didn't have a lot of battery, but it would have to do. I could see my own hands, but nothing else. It was just this intense darkness where not even moonlight could reach. I got down on my knees and touched the floor. This textureless, neutral floor. Not cold or warm, just a solid, matte black. The light didn't reflect off of it. I walked around. At times I could bump into a wall, but when I turned around, the way forward was wide open. I tried jumping a couple of times, but my feet didn't make a sound. I tried calling out, but there was no echo. Not even reverb. It was such a strange sensation that it hurt to comprehend. I ran and crawled and jumped and rolled. There was just nothing. Nothing. And when I screamed, I couldn't hear it outside of my head. It felt like I was inside a cube. Not a room, but like a big, dark cube. It's as if the kind of things had made everything so uncertain that I slipped between the cracks, ending up in some place in between. If I tripped or fell, I could feel myself rolling off the floor and landing on what was previously a wall, making me think every angle was made to be uncertain, designed to change. After a while, I just started walking forward. I walked and walked and walked, but never hit a wall. 10 minutes, still no wall. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and I could taste salt on my tongue. Without anything outside yourself, you start to notice details you would otherwise ignore, like how you breathe or how your heart sounds as it beats. You can hear the tendons stretch in your legs with every step, and you start to question why. I tried to fixate on things I knew for certain. My name, my parents, the name of my childhood friends, but even in that circle of grounding, there was doubt. What color were my mother's eyes, really? In that damn teddy bear keychain, what did it really look like? That seemed to shift something. There was a flash, like a light post going past a speeding car. That was something. Reaction. Maybe the kind of things, if they got me lost, could also help me find a way back. I thought about that teddy bear keychain. I tried to imagine myself on that first drunken morning, picking it up from the fence behind my family home. I remember turning it over in my hands, looking at the colors and the patterns, but in that thought, there was nothing there. Just this swirling pattern of black and white, like the static between TV channels. Thinking about how it tickled my hands, making my brain feel like it needed to discard the memory like an unpleasant sneeze. I brought the memory back further. I thought about that night on the couch with that curly-haired girl. That night when I first heard about the kind of things. Who had she been? We talked all night. We'd made out, but I couldn't remember her name. Did I ever see her again? And there were a couple of things that didn't add up. Had she known anyone at the party? Why was she the only girl there? Why didn't we exchange numbers? My thoughts spiraled as I started to question every step along the path. You are what you do, and if all you've done can be called into question, you start to feel like nothing. And I fell to my knees. It didn't hurt. Nothing hurt. It was like floating in a world that forgot to pull you down. I would sometimes find myself inches above the ground, having to stretch my toes down to feel something solid. After a while, I lost that too. But I kept my mind on that teddy bear. I pushed past the fractal images I'd built in my mind. The red, the blue, the gray, the black, the lime and mango eyes. If you looked past all of it, there were certainties that never changed. It had 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart on its chest. That was always there. That was certain. I repeated it like a mantra. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. Something was happening. The ground came back. There was a light. Were there distant lamps, pieces of wallpaper, or lonely stars? It was a night sky. I recognized some of the constellations. I spun around, pointing out patterns I recognized. I spun on my heel, excited to feel something solid beneath me. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. As I came around the second spin, my entire field of view was absorbed. Something astronomically large, impossibly large, a planet-sized eye. So unfathomable that it couldn't be considered a thing or a place, it just was. An eye. The word rattled in my mind like a panicked bird in a cage, screaming at me, over and over. An eye. It was an eye. It repeated to the point where it turned from thing to word to noise. An eye. An eye. An eye. An eye. An eye. I shut my eyes and imagined the teddy bear key ring in my hands. I imagined the texture. I decided I would have to commit to a truth that I knew to be true. I had to force myself to be certain. I decided it was blue, with red details. That's how I remembered it from that first night, and that's what it had to be. Blue, with red details and lemon eyes. Looking up, I could see dozens of coffee tables in random patterns, all covered in teddy bear keychains of various shapes and patterns and colors. All the while, Something so large that the universe itself looked like the dark of its eye bore down on me from every angle. It didn't need to say anything. I knew what had to be done. It wanted a choice, a certainty. I had to show it the right kind of thing. I have no idea how long I wandered that void, poking and prodding at those little keychains. One was darker blue with yellow lining. One was almost green. Every color combination imaginable, in every angle. The eye was patient. I had to be right. I don't know how long it took me, but I found myself holding something. I held it up and I looked at it. I knew it was the right one before I even noticed the colors. Maybe it became the right one just by believing it to be. That's when it hit me. It didn't matter. The original color was gone. There was no point in trying to restore an idea or thought that had passed from memory. I decided then and there that I would make this something it had never been. I rolled the keychain between my fingers and opened my eyes. My hand was on the wall as the lights flickered back on. I was covered in sweat. All the items from the Kind of Things box were still neatly lined up on the coffee table. Even the frog with the cigarette. The mint green walls were there. The window, the curtains, the closet. And when my shaking hand touched the door handle, it effortlessly swung outward. I cried with relief and crawled out, ending up in the hallway, clutching my teddy bear keychain. The next day, that whole box of items went straight in the trash. I stopped talking about the Kind of Things in my lectures. I made up this other thing about humpback whales and their patterns, but it wasn't nearly as effective. People like talking about their own kind of things and their own ideas relating to it. I still hear people talking about it on campus to this day, despite not mentioning it for about 3 years. I have photographed and documented everything about that teddy bear 100 times over, and it hasn't changed since. I know it better than the color of my mother's eyes. It's my one anchor binding me to this place. I could never go without it. I still get uncertain sometimes. I think when you cluster so many kind of things, it triggers a kind of chain reaction. If you just have the one, I don't think they do that much. You might just make the occasional mistake when trying to remember them. I think what I went through was a result of a cluster impression over a prolonged period of time. I don't ask people that strange question anymore. I don't want to invite them into something they can't prepare for. But if you were to look for a kind of thing on your own, do so in a way that destroys it. Photograph it, keep it close, remember it. If you keep it in the periphery, it may just drag you out there with it. I've heard so many ideas on what they are and why they function this way. Some say that it's demons touching things that we forgot to care for. Others say that it's ghostly possession. I heard one student claiming they are lost souls, looking for solace in places they won't be disturbed. I don't know. I don't think anyone will ever know for sure. It's the nature of Kind of Things to never truly be known. But as long as I have that one thing to keep me grounded, I'll be fine. Maybe there'll be the occasional kind of thing in my life going forward, but at least I will know not to collect them. For now, I'll keep my keychain close and look to things I know for certain. 2 eyes, 2 legs, 2 arms, and a heart. My all red teddy bear keychain with coal black eyes. And alright guys, that wraps up some terrifying stories from Reddit, and I honestly loved the first story in this video, the Mr. Jangle story, so much. That is just downright one of the best Reddit stories I have ever read, so I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and all of the other stories in this video were equally as good, but yeah, comment down below your thoughts. I love reading all of your comments, feedback, and concerns and criticisms. Everything is super appreciated. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. It truly does mean the world. And make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. That also helps more than you know. And all right, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.